Your brain tells you your first thought is the correct one. Your brain is wired to reward speed, not accuracy. The moment a thought appears, it feels sharp, confident, and complete, as if it arrived fully formed for a reason. This isn't intelligence speaking, it's efficiency. Your brain evolved in environments where hesitation could be fatal, so it learned to favor the fastest explanation over the best one. That first thought feels right because it arrives without resistance, without effort, and without competition from alternatives. What makes this especially dangerous is how convincing that initial certainty feels. Your brain releases a small sense of relief when it lands on an answer, signaling that the problem is solved. That relief is emotional, not logical. It discourages further questioning and quietly shuts the door on deeper analysis. Doubt feels uncomfortable, so your brain frames it as unnecessary. This is why first impressions stick, why snap judgments feel justified, and why changing your mind feels like admitting failure. Your brain protects its early conclusions because revising them costs energy and threatens your sense of competence. The longer a first thought goes unchallenged, the more your brain rewrites supporting evidence around it, turning a guess into a belief. Emotionally, this lie is powerful because it flatters you. It tells you that clarity means correctness and confidence means truth. It makes you feel decisive, sharp, and in control. But beneath that confidence is a shortcut pretending to be wisdom. The first thought isn't chosen because it's right. It's chosen because it's fast, familiar, and emotionally comfortable. And once accepted, your brain will defend it as if your identity depends on it. Your brain confuses familiarity with truth. Your brain is deeply comforted by repetition. When an idea appears again and again, it starts to feel smoother, lighter, easier to accept. That ease is not understanding, and it is not evidence, but your brain treats it as both. Familiar thoughts require less energy to process, and your brain mistakes that reduced effort for accuracy. What feels easy feels right. This is why a lie repeated often enough begins to sound reasonable, and why ideas you grew up hearing feel obvious, even when they are flawed. Your brain rewards familiarity with a quiet sense of certainty. It whispers, "You've heard this before, so it must be true." That whisper is persuasive because it lowers your guard. You stop analyzing and start nodding along. Emotionally, familiarity creates safety. The known feels less threatening than the unknown, so your brain clings to repeated narratives as a form of protection. New or unfamiliar information feels heavier, more suspicious, even when it's more accurate. Your brain interprets discomfort as danger, not as a signal to think deeper. Over time, repetition reshapes belief. The more often you encounter a claim, a phrase, or a viewpoint, the more your brain integrates it into your internal reality. It becomes part of the background noise of your thoughts, unquestioned and unchallenged. This is how assumptions harden into common sense. What makes this lie so powerful is that it feels neutral. Familiar ideas don't announce themselves as persuasive. They feel calm, stable, and normal. But that calm is deceptive. Your brain isn't asking whether something is true. It's asking whether it feels known. And once something feels known, your brain treats doubt as unnecessary friction, quietly replacing curiosity with comfort. Your brain exaggerates how much people notice you. Your brain places you at the center of its own universe. Every thought, mistake, and emotion is loud and immediate, so it assumes that same intensity exists in the minds of others. When you stumble over your words, your brain magnifies the moment, replaying it as if everyone else is watching in high definition. In reality, they are trapped inside their own mental noise, barely registering what felt catastrophic to you. This exaggeration comes from self-awareness turning inward. Your brain constantly monitors your behavior, scanning for threats to your social standing, and it mistakes that internal surveillance for external attention. The discomfort you feel becomes proof that something must be visible. If it feels big, your brain assumes it looks big. Emotionally, this lie feeds anxiety and self-consciousness. Your brain convinces you that every flaw is a spotlight moment, that silence means judgment, and that neutral expressions hide negative evaluations. It fills gaps in information with imagined criticism because uncertainty feels more dangerous than a negative assumption. What keeps this illusion alive is memory. Your brain remembers moments when you were noticed and uses them to justify constant vigilance. It ignores the countless times you went unseen. This creates a false sense of exposure, making you shrink, overcorrect, or stay silent to avoid imagined scrutiny. Your brain is not trying to sabotage you. It is trying to protect you from social rejection by overestimating the threat, but in doing so, it traps you in a performance that no one asked for. Most people are too busy managing their own thoughts, fears, and insecurities to notice yours, but your brain prefers a dramatic story over a quiet truth because drama feels safer than vulnerability. Your brain remembers failures more vividly than successes. Your brain is built to prioritize what hurts. When something goes wrong, it leaves a sharper imprint, carving itself deeper into memory than moments that went right. Success passes quietly, but failure arrives with emotion, tension, and self-questioning, and your brain treats that emotional intensity as a signal that the moment is important and must be preserved. This bias comes from survival wiring. Remembering mistakes once helped humans avoid repeating life-threatening errors. Your brain still operates as if every social misstep or personal failure carries the same level of danger. It stores these moments with extra detail, replaying them automatically even when they no longer serve a purpose. Emotionally, this creates a distorted self-image. Your brain builds your identity from what it recalls most often, not what is most accurate. Each remembered failure becomes evidence in an internal case against you, while successes fade into the background as expected, ordinary or undeserved. You begin to feel defined by what went wrong rather than what went right. What makes this lie powerful is repetition. Every time your brain revisits a failure, it strengthens the memory, making it feel more recent and more significant than it actually is. Over time, this replay loop convinces you that failure is the rule and success is the exception. Your brain believes it is protecting you by keeping these memories close, reminding you to be cautious, but instead, it quietly erodes confidence, making progress feel invisible and growth feel fragile. The past becomes heavier than the present, not because it deserves to be, but because your brain decided pain was worth remembering more than progress. Your brain assumes intentions without evidence. Your brain hates uncertainty, especially when it involves other people. When someone's words are vague, their tone unclear, or their behavior unexpected, your brain rushes to fill the gap. It invents intentions, motives, and hidden meanings because not knowing feels unsafe. An assumption, even a negative one, feels better than ambiguity. This habit comes from your brain's need to predict. It constantly tries to stay one step ahead, scanning for potential threats or social risks. When information is incomplete, it doesn't wait for facts, it guesses. Those guesses feel real because they are emotionally charged. If your brain senses rejection, disrespect, or danger, it reacts as if those interpretations are confirmed truths. Emotionally, this lie is powerful because it personalizes everything. A delayed reply becomes disinterest. A short response becomes anger. A neutral expression becomes judgment. Your brain frames other people's behavior around you, ignoring countless alternative explanations that don't trigger the same emotional response. Once an assumed intention forms, your brain looks for evidence to support it. It replays interactions, cherry-picking details that confirm the story it created while dismissing anything that contradicts it. The assumption hardens into belief, and the belief shapes how you respond, often creating the very tension you feared. Your brain believes it is protecting you by preparing you for the worst, but in doing so, it turns imagination into conviction and uncertainty into emotional certainty. Relationships suffer not because of what was intended, but because your brain decided it already knew the truth, and acted on a story that was never verified. Your brain mistakes confidence for competence. Your brain is drawn to certainty like gravity. When someone speaks without hesitation, stands tall, and moves as if they belong, your brain relaxes and assumes safety. That ease is misread as skill. Confidence feels like a shortcut to truth because uncertainty demands effort, and your brain would rather stop searching than keep questioning. This confusion begins early. From childhood, decisive voices are rewarded, while hesitation is treated as weakness. Over time, your brain learns to associate confidence with authority and authority with correctness. It stops asking whether someone is capable and starts asking only whether they seem sure. The emotional relief of certainty replaces the work of evaluation. Emotionally, confidence is contagious. When someone appears convinced, your brain mirrors that conviction, lowering skepticism and raising trust. Doubt feels socially risky, so your brain frames confident people as leaders and uncertain people as unreliable, even when the opposite is true. This is why wrong answers delivered boldly often overpower correct answers delivered carefully. Your brain also applies this lie inward. When you feel confident, you assume you're competent. When you feel unsure, you assume you're not ready. This turns emotion into evidence. Temporary confidence becomes proof of ability, while normal uncertainty becomes a reason to stop. Growth slows, not because you lack skill, but because your brain equates discomfort with incapacity. What makes this lie dangerous is how invisible it is. Confidence doesn't announce itself as performance. It feels authentic, solid, earned. But your brain isn't measuring outcomes or understanding, it's responding to tone, posture, and emotional clarity. In a world full of noise, confidence cuts through, and your brain mistakes volume for value, certainty for truth, and conviction for competence, surrendering judgment for the comfort of believing someone knows what they're doing. Your brain fills memory gaps with invented details. Your brain hates emptiness. When a memory is incomplete, unclear, or fragmented, it doesn't leave it blank. It fills the gap, not with facts, but with whatever feels most coherent, emotionally satisfying, and consistent with the story it already believes. To your brain, a complete story matters more than an accurate one. Memory is not a recording, it's a reconstruction. Each time you recall an event, your brain rebuilds it from pieces: emotions, assumptions, later knowledge, and imagination. When details are missing, your brain quietly improvises, stitching together a version that feels right. Because this process happens automatically, the invented parts feel just as real as the true ones. Emotion plays a key role in this deception. Strong feelings act like glue, binding false details into the memory so tightly that questioning them feels like questioning reality itself. The more emotional the memory, the more confident your brain becomes in its accuracy, even as it drifts further from what actually happened. This is why two people can remember the same moment completely differently, and both feel certain they're right. Your brain prioritizes internal consistency over external truth. It adjusts memories to protect identity, justify decisions, and maintain a stable sense of self. If a detail doesn't fit the narrative, it gets reshaped or replaced. What makes this lie unsettling is how convincing it is. Your brain doesn't label invented details as guesses. It presents them as facts, complete with imagery, sound, and emotion. Over time, repetition hardens these reconstructions into memories, and confidence grows alongside distortion. Your brain believes it is helping you make sense of the past, but in doing so, it quietly blurs the line between what happened and what feels like it must have happened, leaving you trusting a story that may never have been real in the first place. Your brain believes repetition equals accuracy. Your brain is highly sensitive to what it hears again and again. Each repetition smooths the idea, sanding down its rough edges until it feels familiar, natural, and unquestionable. That smoothness is deceptive. It doesn't come from truth, it comes from exposure. The more often something is repeated, the less effort your brain needs to process it, and that ease gets misread as correctness. This happens quietly. The first time you hear a claim, your brain may hesitate. The second time, it feels less foreign. By the fifth or 10th time, resistance fades entirely. Your brain stops asking whether the idea is true and starts treating it as background reality. What was once a statement becomes an assumption. Emotion plays a central role here. Repetition creates comfort, and comfort feels safe. Your brain prefers what feels safe over what requires scrutiny. Challenging a repeated idea demands energy and invites uncertainty, so your brain avoids that discomfort by labeling the familiar as accurate. This is why slogans persuade, why misinformation spreads, and why beliefs passed down through culture feel unquestionable. Your brain equates frequency with reliability because, historically, shared knowledge often did mean survival. But in modern life, repetition no longer filters for truth, it filters for volume. What makes this lie dangerous is that it feels neutral and logical. Your brain doesn't announce the switch from thinking to accepting. It simply grows tired of questioning. Over time, repeated ideas feel obvious, and obvious things feel true. The belief settles in not because it was examined and proven, but because your brain grew used to hearing it and mistook that familiarity for fact. Your brain overestimates short-term discomfort. Your brain has a habit of screaming about pain that hasn't happened yet. The moment you consider doing something uncomfortable, speaking up, starting, quitting, changing, your brain inflates the feeling in advance. It paints discomfort as overwhelming, unbearable, and lasting far longer than it ever does. This exaggeration isn't based on reality, it's based on anticipation. Your brain predicts discomfort using emotion, not measurement. It remembers how bad anxiety felt once and assumes it will feel just as intense every time, ignoring how quickly feelings rise and fall. The body adapts fast, but your brain pretends it won't. It turns minutes into hours, moments into disasters. Emotionally, this lie is incredibly persuasive. The imagined discomfort feels real enough to trigger avoidance. Your chest tightens, your stomach sinks, and your brain says, "See? This is proof you shouldn't do it." But that sensation isn't the future. It's fear reacting to a thought. Your brain confuses anticipation with experience. This is why procrastination feels protective. Avoiding the action instantly reduces the imagined pain, rewarding your brain for staying safe. Relief becomes the signal that avoidance was the right choice. Over time, your brain learns that not acting feels better in the short term, even when it causes more pain later. What your brain refuses to acknowledge is that discomfort is brief and survivable. Most difficult moments peak quickly and fade faster than expected, but your brain isn't designed to optimize growth, it's designed to minimize immediate distress. So it lies, inflates, and dramatizes, convincing you that short-term discomfort is a threat, when in reality, it is often the doorway your brain is most afraid to walk through. Your brain underestimates long-term consequences. Your brain lives in the present moment, even when it pretends to think about the future. Immediate sensations are loud and demanding, while distant outcomes feel faint and abstract. Because of this, your brain treats long-term consequences as optional thoughts rather than real events. If a result doesn't create emotion right now, it barely registers as important. This bias comes from how your brain values urgency. Short-term rewards and relief trigger strong emotional signals, while future costs arrive without sensation. Skipping rest, delaying difficult conversations, or choosing comfort over discipline feels harmless in the moment because the damage doesn't hurt yet. Your brain interprets the absence of pain as the absence of risk. Emotionally, this creates a dangerous illusion of control. Your brain tells you that future you will handle the fallout, as if that person is stronger, more disciplined, or more motivated. This separation allows you to betray long-term goals without feeling guilt. The cost feels distant, so responsibility feels light. What strengthens this lie is gradual change. Long-term consequences rarely arrive all at once. They accumulate quietly, almost invisibly, which makes them easy to ignore. Your brain struggles to track slow decline or delayed reward, so it keeps choosing what feels good now over what matters later. Your brain is not careless, it is impatient. It evolved to survive the next moment, not to optimize the next decade. But in modern life, this impatience becomes self-sabotage. By the time long-term consequences finally feel real, they often feel inevitable, not because they were unavoidable, but because your brain dismissed them when they were still preventable, choosing short-term comfort over long-term clarity without ever sounding an alarm. Your brain treats feelings as facts. Your brain is deeply influenced by emotion, even when it pretends to be logical. The moment you feel something strongly, your brain interprets that feeling as evidence. If something feels wrong, it must be wrong. If something feels right, it must be true. Emotion arrives first, and reasoning is often recruited afterward to justify it. This happens because feelings are fast. They emerge before conscious thought has time to evaluate the situation, and your brain trusts speed. Emotions evolved as survival signals, quick judgments meant to guide action when there wasn't time to think. But in modern life, those same signals are applied to complex situations where feeling and reality don't always align. Emotion also creates certainty. A feeling doesn't arrive with doubt, it arrives whole and convincing. Your brain confuses intensity with accuracy, assuming that the stronger the emotion, the more valid the conclusion. Anxiety becomes proof of danger. Discomfort becomes proof of a bad decision. Confidence becomes proof of correctness. What makes this lie so powerful is how personal it feels. Feelings seem intimate and undeniable, so questioning them feels like betraying yourself. Your brain reinforces this by replaying emotional experiences, strengthening the belief that how you feel is how things are. Over time, this habit reshapes perception. You stop asking what is true and start asking what feels true. Evidence that contradicts your emotional state feels threatening or dismissible. Your brain filters reality through mood, turning temporary emotions into permanent conclusions. Your brain isn't trying to deceive you, it's trying to keep you safe. But when feelings become facts, clarity is replaced by conviction, and understanding is replaced by certainty, leaving you deeply sure of things that were never proven, only felt. Your brain ignores information that challenges beliefs. Your brain is deeply invested in protecting what it already believes. The moment new information appears that threatens an existing belief, your brain doesn't evaluate it neutrally. It reacts emotionally first. Doubt feels like danger, and contradiction feels like an attack. So instead of asking, "Is this true?" your brain asks, "Does this threaten me?" This happens because beliefs are not just ideas. Over time, they become part of your identity. When a belief is challenged, your brain interprets it as a challenge to who you are, how you see the world, and whether your past decisions were justified. That realization creates discomfort, and your brain is wired to avoid discomfort at all costs. Rather than confronting that tension, your brain filters. It skims past opposing facts, questions the source, or finds small flaws to dismiss the entire message. Information that agrees with what you already think feels validating and calming, so it gets stored and reinforced. Information that disagrees feels irritating, suspicious, or exhausting, so it gets minimized or forgotten. Emotionally, this lie is seductive because it preserves certainty. Your brain would rather feel right than be accurate. It rewards agreement with a sense of confidence and punishes contradiction with anxiety. Over time, this trains you to unconsciously seek confirmation and avoid challenge. The most dangerous part is that this process feels rational. Your brain convinces you that you're being critical, objective, and discerning, when in reality it's selectively blind. The belief grows stronger not because it survives scrutiny, but because scrutiny was never allowed in. By ignoring what threatens it, your brain builds a reality that feels solid, coherent, and safe, even if it rests on incomplete truth. Your brain assumes the future will mirror the present. Your brain uses the present moment as its default template for the future. Whatever you feel now, it assumes you will feel later. Whatever your situation is today, it quietly projects it forward as if time has no power to alter it. This isn't realism, it's a shortcut. Your brain lacks access to future experiences, so it reuses the emotional data it already has. When you're tired, discouraged, or stuck, your brain interprets that state as permanent. It tells you this is how things are and how they will remain. The problem isn't logic, it's emotional inertia. Your brain confuses this is how it feels now with this is how it will always feel. Emotionally, this lie is heavy. It turns temporary discomfort into hopelessness and momentary clarity into overconfidence. When things are good, your brain assumes stability. When things are bad, it assumes decline. It struggles to imagine change because change requires uncertainty, and uncertainty feels unsafe. Your brain also ignores adaptation. It forgets how quickly humans adjust to new circumstances, new routines, and new identities. What feels unbearable at first often becomes normal, but your brain refuses to simulate that adjustment. It locks you into the emotional frame of the present moment. This assumption shapes decisions in subtle ways. It keeps you from starting because you believe the struggle will never ease. It keeps you from leaving because you assume nothing better exists. Your brain clings to the present not because it is accurate, but because it is known. The future feels empty and abstract, so your brain fills it with today's emotions, mistaking familiarity for prediction and comfort for truth. Your brain overvalues recent experiences. Your brain gives special weight to what just happened. Recent events feel clearer, more vivid, and more relevant, so your brain treats them as better evidence of reality. What happened last week feels more important than what happened last year, not because it matters more, but because it's easier to recall. Memory accessibility becomes mistaken for significance. This happens because your brain relies on what is most available. Recent experiences come with fresh emotion, sharper detail, and less mental effort to retrieve. Your brain interprets that ease as importance. It assumes that what's easiest to remember must be what best represents the truth, quietly ignoring older but more meaningful patterns. Emotionally, this distorts judgment. A single bad day can convince you that everything is falling apart. A recent success can make you feel unstoppable. Your brain zooms in on the latest data point and treats it as the whole story, creating emotional swings that feel justified but are rarely accurate. This lie is especially powerful in moments of stress. When emotions are high, recent experiences dominate your thinking even more. Your brain reaches for the last thing that hurt or helped and uses it to predict the future. This turns temporary states into permanent conclusions and short trends into long-term beliefs. Your brain believes it is being practical by focusing on what's current. In reality, it is sacrificing perspective for speed. It forgets that reality is built from patterns, not snapshots. By overvaluing what just happened, your brain convinces you that the present moment defines everything, quietly erasing context, history, and patience in favor of whatever is loudest right now. Your brain misjudges probabilities based on emotion. Your brain does not calculate risk with numbers, it calculates it with feelings. When something triggers fear, excitement, or anxiety, your brain inflates its likelihood, making rare events feel imminent and common outcomes feel distant. Emotion becomes the lens through which probability is judged, and that lens is distorted. This happens because your brain evolved to respond to vivid threats, not statistical ones. A dramatic story, a striking image, or a personal experience carries more emotional weight than abstract data. Your brain treats that emotional intensity as a signal of importance, assuming that what feels powerful must also be likely. Fear is especially persuasive. When you feel afraid, your brain shifts into protection mode, exaggerating danger to keep you alert. A single negative example can outweigh countless neutral ones, making unlikely risks feel unavoidable. At the same time, positive emotions can create the opposite illusion, causing your brain to downplay danger when something feels rewarding or familiar. Emotion also shortcuts learning. Instead of updating beliefs based on long-term patterns, your brain relies on recent or memorable experiences. If something happened once and felt intense, your brain treats it as representative, even when it isn't. This is how accidents feel more common than they are, and slow, invisible risks feel irrelevant. What makes this lie dangerous is its confidence. Emotional judgments feel intuitive and urgent, leaving little room for reflection. Your brain doesn't pause to ask how often something actually happens. It asks how strongly it feels right now. In this way, emotion quietly replaces math. Possibility turns into perceived certainty, rarity turns into inevitability, and your brain convinces you that your fear or excitement is not just a reaction, but a reliable forecast of what is about to happen. Your brain believes effort already spent must be justified. Your brain hates the idea of wasted effort. The moment you invest time, energy, or emotion into something, your brain begins treating that investment as sacred. Walking away doesn't feel neutral, it feels like loss. Even when new evidence shows that continuing is harmful or pointless, your brain resists letting go because doing so would force it to admit that the effort already spent cannot be recovered. This reaction is emotional before it is logical. Your brain ties effort to identity and self-worth. If you stop, it feels like saying your past choices were wrong, that your judgment failed, or that you were naive. That discomfort is sharp, so your brain searches for reasons to continue, reframing persistence as strength and quitting as weakness. Emotionally, this creates a trap. The more you invest, the harder it becomes to leave, even as the situation worsens. Your brain tells you that staying a little longer will make it all worth it, that one more push will redeem everything already given. This hope feels productive, but it's fueled by fear, not reason. What makes this lie powerful is how reasonable it sounds. Commitment is praised, endurance is admired, and giving up is often stigmatized. Your brain uses these values to justify clinging to failing paths, relationships, or decisions. In doing so, it protects your ego at the expense of your future. The past becomes an anchor rather than a lesson. Your brain isn't asking what choice is best now, it's asking how to defend what was done before, and as long as that question leads, effort keeps piling onto mistakes, not because it's wise, but because stopping feels unbearable. Your brain exaggerates threats in uncertainty. Your brain becomes most alarmed when it doesn't have clear information. In the absence of certainty, it assumes danger. Open-ended situations, unclear outcomes, and unanswered questions trigger your brain's threat systems because not knowing removes its sense of control. When it can't predict, it prepares for the worst. This exaggeration is rooted in survival. Your brain evolved to treat uncertainty as a warning signal. In the past, unknown rustling in the dark could mean a predator, so assuming threat increased survival. That same wiring now activates in modern situations where the risk is social, emotional, or imagined rather than physical. Emotionally, uncertainty feels heavier than bad news. A negative outcome can be processed, but an unknown one keeps your brain in a constant state of tension. It fills the gaps with catastrophic possibilities, each one feeling more convincing than the last. The absence of facts becomes permission for fear to take over. Your brain also mistakes anxiety for intuition. The more uneasy you feel, the more it interprets that discomfort as evidence that something is wrong. It doesn't recognize that the fear is coming from the lack of information itself. the feeling becomes the proof. This distortion influences behavior quietly. You avoid decisions, delay conversations, and resist change not because of real danger, but because your brain has turned uncertainty into a threat. It prefers familiar discomfort over unknown possibility. By exaggerating what might go wrong, your brain convinces you that staying still is safer than moving forward, even when the real risk lies in never finding out what could have happened. Your brain downplays risks you choose voluntarily. Your brain is deeply invested in protecting your sense of agency. When you choose something willingly, your brain reframes the risk as acceptable, manageable, or smaller than it actually is. The moment a danger becomes your decision, it feels less threatening, not because it changed, but because admitting the risk would mean admitting doubt about your own judgment. This bias is rooted in emotional self-defense. Your brain equates choice with control, and control with safety. Risks imposed on you feel alarming and unfair, while risks you opt in to feel intentional and therefore justified. The emotional discomfort of acknowledging danger is replaced with confidence, even when the facts haven't shifted at all. Emotionally, this creates blind spots. Your brain minimizes warning signs, reframes red flags as trade-offs, and dismisses concerns as overreactions. You become more tolerant of harm when it aligns with your identity or goals. The risk doesn't disappear, but your awareness of it dulls, making danger feel distant and manageable. This is why people defend unhealthy habits, stay in damaging situations, or ignore obvious consequences as long as they can say, "I chose this." Choice becomes a shield against fear. Your brain would rather believe you are in control than accept that you willingly walked into something risky. What makes this lie powerful is how reasonable it feels. Voluntary risk carries a sense of purpose, and purpose reduces anxiety. But your brain is not evaluating outcomes, it is protecting ego and coherence. By downplaying chosen risks, it preserves your self-image, even if it costs your well-being, quietly convincing you that danger is less dangerous when it wears the mask of freedom. Your brain mistakes correlation for causation. Your brain is addicted to explanation. When two things happen close together, it instinctively connects them, weaving them into a cause and effect story that feels satisfying and complete. Randomness is uncomfortable, so your brain replaces it with intention, even when none exists. If one event follows another, your brain assumes the first must have caused the second. This tendency comes from pattern-seeking survival instincts. Early humans benefited from quickly linking actions to outcomes, even when the connection was imperfect. Your brain still operates this way, preferring a simple story over uncertainty. Coincidence feels like negligence, but a cause feels like control. Emotion strengthens this illusion. When an outcome is meaningful, painful, or rewarding, your brain becomes even more eager to explain it. The stronger the emotion, the stronger the imagined link. A bad result demands a reason, and your brain supplies one, whether it's accurate or not. Over time, these assumed connections harden into beliefs. Your brain remembers the times the pattern seemed to work and forgets the times it didn't. This selective memory reinforces the illusion of causation, turning coincidence into proof. Once the story is formed, your brain defends it, filtering out information that challenges the link. What makes this lie convincing is how logical it feels. Cause and effect are comforting. They suggest that outcomes are predictable and manageable, but your brain often ignores hidden variables, chance, and complexity in favor of a clean narrative. By mistaking correlation for causation, your brain gives you certainty at the cost of accuracy. It trades truth for reassurance, leaving you confident in explanations that feel right, make sense emotionally, and offer control, even when they are built on nothing more than timing and coincidence. Your brain believes seeing is always believing. Your brain places enormous trust in what your eyes deliver. Visual information feels direct, immediate, and unquestionable, as if perception itself is proof. When you see something, your brain skips caution and moves straight to certainty, assuming that what appears in front of you must reflect reality as it truly is. This confidence comes from survival instincts. For most of human history, what you saw could kill you or save you, so visual cues were treated as reliable signals. Your brain still carries that ancient trust, even though modern environments are filled with illusions, framing, manipulation, and incomplete perspectives. It rarely asks what is missing from the frame. Emotionally, vision feels grounding. Seeing something reduces ambiguity, and ambiguity makes your brain uneasy. When an image, expression, or moment is visible, your brain relaxes and stops questioning. It fills in context, intention, and meaning automatically, often without awareness. This is why appearances mislead so easily. A confident posture looks like competence. A calm face looks like certainty. A single image looks like the whole story. Your brain takes visual shortcuts, mistaking surface cues for depth and snapshots for truth. What makes this lie dangerous is how fast it works. There is no pause between seeing and believing. Your brain does not wait for explanation, verification, or alternative angles. It reacts instantly, emotionally, and decisively. In a world of curated images, edited moments, and strategic presentation, this trust becomes a vulnerability. Your brain assumes honesty in what is visible and ignores what cannot be seen. It confuses clarity with completeness and perception with reality, convincing you that your eyes are neutral witnesses, when in truth, they are only delivering fragments that your brain eagerly turns into conclusions. Your brain thinks multitasking is effective. Your brain loves the illusion of momentum. When you juggle multiple tasks at once, it feels busy, sharp, and productive. That feeling is intoxicating. It creates the sense that you're doing more, moving faster, staying ahead. But what's actually happening is not parallel processing. It's rapid switching, and your brain hides the cost from you. Every time you switch tasks, your brain pays a cognitive toll. Attention has to disengage, reorient, and reload context, but this effort happens silently. Because you don't feel the loss directly, your brain assumes it doesn't exist. The constant stimulation tricks you into believing efficiency is increasing when it's quietly leaking away. Emotionally, multitasking feels safe because it avoids stillness. Focusing on one thing exposes you to boredom, frustration, or the fear of doing something poorly. Splitting attention keeps discomfort at bay. Your brain prefers scattered engagement over sustained effort because it feels less demanding in the moment. What reinforces this lie is reward. Each small task switch delivers a tiny hit of satisfaction, a sense of progress without depth. Your brain begins to associate distraction with achievement. Over time, still focus feels uncomfortable, even threatening, while chaos feels normal. The most dangerous part is confidence. Your brain genuinely believes it's operating at a higher level when multitasking, even as accuracy drops, mistakes increase, and learning weakens. Because the damage is gradual and invisible, the illusion persists. Your brain isn't optimizing performance, it's optimizing stimulation, convincing you that doing many things poorly is better than doing one thing well, and calling that productivity. Your brain assumes others think like you. Your brain uses itself as a reference point for understanding the world. Your thoughts, values, fears, and logic feel natural and obvious, so your brain assumes they must be common. When you make a decision, it feels reasonable, so you expect others to arrive at the same conclusion if given the same information. This assumption feels fair, but it's deeply misleading. This happens because imagining minds different from your own requires effort. Your brain conserves energy by projecting your inner world outward, treating it as a default setting for everyone else. It fills gaps in understanding with your own reasoning, not realizing it's guessing. What feels like empathy is often just self-reflection. Emotionally, this lie fuels misunderstanding. When others act differently, your brain interprets it as ignorance, stubbornness, or malice rather than difference. Disagreement feels personal because it violates the expectation of shared logic. You wonder why they don't get it, assuming the problem lies with them, not with the assumption itself. This bias also distorts communication. Your brain believes what is clear to you must be clear to others, so it underexplains, overassumes, and grows frustrated when confusion appears. It forgets that people carry different experiences, incentives, and emotional histories that shape how they think and decide. Your brain clings to this assumption because it simplifies the social world. Shared thinking feels predictable and safe, but reality is messier. By assuming others think like you, your brain trades curiosity for comfort. It replaces listening with projection and connection with expectation, quietly turning difference into friction, not because people are wrong, but because your brain never learned to step outside itself. Your brain confuses popularity with quality. Your brain is deeply influenced by what others seem to value. When many people approve of something, your brain interprets that approval as evidence of worth. Popularity feels like proof, not because it is reliable, but because it reduces uncertainty. If others have already chosen it, your brain assumes the thinking has been done for you. This confusion is rooted in social survival. For most of human history, aligning with the group meant safety. Your brain learned to trust consensus because disagreement once carried real risk. That instinct still operates, even when popularity has nothing to do with quality, truth, or usefulness. Emotionally, popularity creates reassurance. Seeing widespread approval calms doubt and quiets critical thinking. Your brain experiences a subtle relief, interpreting collective attention as validation. The more visible the approval, the stronger the effect. Numbers, likes, applause, and trends act as shortcuts, replacing evaluation with imitation. What makes this lie powerful is how invisible it is. Your brain doesn't announce that it's outsourcing judgment. It simply makes popular things feel better, smarter, and more trustworthy. Unpopular or niche ideas, no matter how strong, feel suspicious or inferior by comparison. Over time, this bias reshapes taste and belief. Your brain starts to equate being widely accepted with being correct. You feel drawn toward what others praise and uneasy about what stands alone. This pressure operates quietly, nudging choices while preserving the illusion of independence. Your brain believes it is helping you belong and avoid error, but by confusing popularity with quality, it trades depth for comfort. It chooses safety over discernment, convincing you that widespread attention is a measure of value, when often it is only a measure of visibility. Your brain believes intuition is always reliable. Your brain treats intuition like a shortcut to truth. When a feeling appears suddenly and confidently, it feels wise, almost authoritative, as if it comes from a deeper, more authentic place than deliberate thought. That sensation is compelling because it arrives without effort. Your brain interprets that ease as insight rather than as a guess shaped by habit, memory, and emotion. Intuition is built from patterns your brain has absorbed over time, many of which you are not aware of. When a situation feels familiar, your brain rapidly matches it to past experiences and delivers a feeling instead of an explanation. That feeling feels immediate and certain, so your brain trusts it without asking where it came from or whether the pattern it's based on is accurate. Emotion makes this trust stronger. Intuitive thoughts often come with confidence, urgency, or a sense of clarity, and your brain confuses emotional strength with reliability. Doubting intuition feels like ignoring an inner warning or betraying your gut, so your brain frames hesitation as a mistake. This becomes dangerous when intuition is shaped by bias, fear, or incomplete experience. Your brain does not distinguish between patterns learned from truth and patterns learned from repetition, trauma, or assumption. It delivers both with the same conviction. What makes this lie powerful is how personal it feels. Intuition feels like it belongs to you, so questioning it feels like questioning yourself. Your brain protects that feeling, reinforcing it even when evidence disagrees. Over time, intuition becomes a story your brain tells about its own wisdom, and the more you believe it is always right, the less willing you become to slow down, examine, and notice when that inner voice is confidently wrong. Your brain overestimates personal control. Your brain is deeply invested in the idea that you are in charge. It wants to believe that outcomes bend to effort, intention, and willpower, because believing otherwise feels unsettling. When things go right, your brain credits your decisions. When things go wrong, it searches for where you should have acted differently, reinforcing the illusion that control was always available. This overestimation comes from hindsight. Once an outcome is known, your brain rewrites the past to make it seem predictable. It convinces you that the signs were obvious, that the choice was clear, and that a better decision would have guaranteed a better result. This makes randomness feel like a personal failure instead of what it often is: chance. Emotionally, this lie is comforting and cruel at the same time. It comforts you by suggesting you can prevent pain if you just try hard enough, but it also loads you with unnecessary guilt and pressure. When events unfold beyond your influence, your brain interprets that loss of control as incompetence rather than reality. Your brain also underestimates how much external forces shape outcomes. Timing, other people's decisions, systems, luck, and constraints fade into the background. What remains is a simplified story where you are the main driver, because that story preserves a sense of agency. This distortion affects how you judge yourself and others. You blame yourself for things that were never fully yours to control, and you judge others harshly for outcomes shaped by invisible variables. Your brain clings to control because uncertainty is frightening. Admitting how little influence you sometimes have feels like vulnerability, so it lies, inflates your power, and tells you that if you just choose better, everything will obey, even when reality has never worked that way. Your brain underestimates randomness. Your brain is desperate for order. Chaos feels threatening, so your brain searches for causes, patterns, and meaning even where none exist. When something happens, especially something emotional, your brain wants a reason. Randomness offers no comfort, no lesson, no sense of control, so your brain quietly pushes it aside and replaces it with a story. This happens because your brain is a prediction machine. It survives by believing the world is explainable and, therefore, manageable. Random events break that illusion. Accepting that outcomes can occur without intention, fairness, or warning makes you feel exposed. So your brain reframes chance as choice, luck as skill, and coincidence as consequence. Emotionally, this lie is soothing. If success is earned and failure is caused, then the world feels just and controllable. Your brain prefers to believe that effort guarantees results and mistakes explain losses. Randomness threatens identity because it suggests that not everything is a reflection of who you are or what you did. This distortion shows up everywhere. A lucky win becomes proof of talent. A random loss becomes a personal flaw. Your brain builds narratives around noise, convincing you that patterns exist where there are only probabilities. The more emotional the outcome, the stronger the story your brain invents to explain it. What makes this especially dangerous is how invisible randomness becomes over time. Your brain remembers meaningful outcomes and forgets neutral ones, reinforcing the illusion of order. It trains you to overlearn from single events and to draw conclusions from limited data. Your brain isn't lying out of malice. It is protecting you from uncertainty. But by underestimating randomness, it overburdens you with responsibility for outcomes you couldn't control and gives you credit for success you didn't fully earn. In trying to make the world feel predictable, your brain quietly replaces reality with reassurance. trading truth for the comfort of believing everything happens for a reason. Your brain believes silence implies agreement. Your brain is uncomfortable with ambiguity. When someone says nothing, your brain rushes to fill the void with meaning, and the most reassuring meaning is agreement. Silence feels like confirmation because it removes uncertainty. If no one objects, your brain assumes everything is fine. This belief comes from your brain's need for social coherence. Disagreement creates tension, and tension signals potential conflict. To avoid that discomfort, your brain interprets silence as alignment rather than as absence of response. It chooses the explanation that keeps the emotional environment stable. Emotionally, this lie protects your sense of safety. Silence doesn't challenge you, doesn't threaten rejection, and doesn't force confrontation. Your brain rewards this interpretation with calm, allowing you to move forward without questioning. Doubt would require vulnerability, so your brain avoids it. What makes this illusion dangerous is how often silence has nothing to do with consent. People stay quiet for countless reasons: fear, exhaustion, uncertainty, power imbalance, or simply not feeling safe enough to speak. Your brain ignores these possibilities because they complicate the story. Over time, this assumption hardens into expectation. Your brain begins to treat silence as validation, reinforcing behaviors and beliefs without feedback. You stop checking, stop listening, and stop inviting response because your brain believes the absence of resistance is the same as support. Your brain thinks it is maintaining harmony, but it is often preserving misunderstanding. By turning silence into agreement, it replaces communication with assumption. What feels like shared understanding is sometimes only unspoken distance, and your brain prefers that illusion to the discomfort of asking what silence actually means. Your brain trusts vivid stories over statistics. Your brain is moved by stories because stories feel alive. A single vivid narrative can trigger emotion, imagery, and empathy in a way numbers never do. When you hear a detailed personal story, your brain reacts as if it is experiencing the event itself. Statistics remain abstract, distant, and cold, while stories feel real, human, and urgent. This happens because your brain evolved to learn through experience and storytelling, not through data tables. Long before charts and probabilities existed, knowledge was passed down through narratives that carried emotion and meaning. Your brain still treats stories as lessons and treats numbers as noise. Emotion gives stories their power. A single example of loss, success, or danger feels more convincing than 1,000 data points because it activates fear, hope, or sympathy. Your brain mistakes emotional impact for likelihood. If a story is easy to imagine, it feels more common than it actually is. This is why rare events can feel frequent and unlikely risks can feel inevitable. Your brain focuses on what it can picture, not what is statistically true. Numbers require effort to interpret, and effort creates distance. Stories remove that distance and pull you in. What makes this lie persuasive is how natural it feels. Your brain isn't trying to mislead you. It's responding to what it understands best. But in doing so, it quietly ignores scale, context, and probability. A single dramatic story can outweigh overwhelming evidence, not because it is representative, but because it feels meaningful. Your brain confuses meaning with accuracy, allowing emotion to stand in for truth and letting powerful narratives shape beliefs that data was never given a chance to defend. Your brain rewrites memories to fit identity. Your brain doesn't store memories as fixed recordings. It stores them as flexible stories, and every time you recall one, it subtly edits it. Those edits aren't random. They bend in the direction of who you believe you are now. Your brain reshapes the past to protect your identity, even if it means sacrificing accuracy. When a memory threatens your self-image, your brain softens it, reframes it, or changes the details. If you see yourself as capable, failures become misunderstandings. If you see yourself as kind, moments of cruelty gain justification. Over time, these small adjustments turn into a version of the past that feels consistent, coherent, and emotionally safer. Emotionally, this lie is powerful because identity feels like survival. Your brain treats threats to identity as threats to self. Admitting that you acted against your values, made a poor choice, or believed something false creates internal conflict, and your brain resolves that conflict by rewriting the story instead of questioning the self. Each retelling strengthens the edited version. The more you remember a memory, the less it resembles the original event. Your brain fills gaps with assumptions, emotions, and current beliefs until the memory reflects who you are now more than what actually happened then. This distortion shapes how you understand your life. You begin to see a narrative of consistency and intention where there may have been confusion and chance. Your brain isn't trying to deceive you maliciously. It's trying to keep your sense of self intact. But in doing so, it quietly replaces truth with coherence, turning memory into a mirror that reflects identity rather than reality. Your brain believes you are less biased than others. Your brain likes to see itself as fair, rational, and objective. When you notice bias in others, it feels obvious and almost embarrassing, as if they are failing to see what is clearly in front of them. But when it comes to your own judgments, your brain offers a quiet exemption. It tells you that you are thinking things through, that your conclusions are reasoned, and that any influence you feel is justified. This illusion exists because your brain experiences its own thoughts from the inside. You feel the reasoning process, the intentions, the explanations, so your conclusions feel earned. With others, you only see outcomes, not the internal struggle. Their mistakes look careless, while yours look understandable. Perspective turns bias into insight when it belongs to you. Emotionally, this belief protects your identity. Admitting bias feels like admitting weakness or manipulation, so your brain reframes your preferences as logic and your assumptions as common sense. It allows you to criticize others while preserving a positive self-image, keeping discomfort at bay. This distortion becomes especially powerful in disagreements. When someone challenges you, your brain assumes they are being emotional, misinformed, or influenced, while you are simply seeing clearly. This makes listening feel unnecessary and compromise feel like surrender. The conversation shifts from understanding to defending. What keeps this lie alive is how subtle bias feels from the inside. It doesn't announce itself. It feels like intuition, experience, or clarity. Your brain doesn't warn you that it's filtering information in your favor. It rewards you with confidence instead. In believing you are less biased than others, your brain quietly closes itself off from correction, mistaking self-trust for objectivity and certainty for truth, while the blind spot grows precisely where you feel most sure. Your brain overreacts to losses compared to gains. Your brain feels loss more sharply than gain. When something is taken away, the emotional impact is immediate and intense, while gains arrive quietly and fade faster. Losing $10 hurts more than gaining $10 feels good, and your brain treats that imbalance as meaningful, not accidental. This reaction is rooted in survival. For most of human history, losing resources could mean danger or death, while gaining extra offered diminishing returns. Your brain learned to prioritize protection over progress, wiring itself to respond more strongly to loss than to reward. That wiring still dominates your decisions today. Emotionally, loss triggers fear and regret. Your brain amplifies these feelings to push you toward caution. It frames losses as personal failures and gains as temporary or expected. This emotional weighting shapes memory, making negative outcomes feel larger, heavier, and more important than positive ones. What keeps this lie powerful is anticipation. Your brain doesn't just react to loss, it imagines it. The fear of losing something you have often outweighs the potential joy of gaining something better. This makes change feel dangerous and stagnation feel safe, even when growth is objectively beneficial. Over time, this imbalance distorts decision-making. Your brain avoids risks that could improve your life and clings to familiar discomfort because it feels less threatening than possible loss. You protect what exists instead of pursuing what could be. Your brain believes it is keeping you safe, but it is also shrinking your world. By overreacting to losses and underreacting to gains, it quietly convinces you that preserving the present matters more than improving the future, even when the cost of staying the same is far greater than the risk of moving forward. Your brain assumes past success guarantees future success. Your brain is comforted by patterns that seem to repeat. When something works once or several times, your brain treats that outcome as proof of a reliable formula. Success becomes a signal that the conditions are stable and the path is safe. The uncertainty of the future feels less threatening when the past appears to offer reassurance. This assumption is emotional before it is logical. Past success feels like validation of your judgment, your skill, and your identity. Letting go of that belief would mean accepting that success may have been influenced by timing, chance, or factors outside your control. Your brain resists that idea because it weakens the sense of mastery it wants to preserve. Over time, your brain begins to blur the line between skill and outcome. It credits ability for wins and quietly dismisses luck. The more successful you've been, the stronger this illusion becomes. Confidence grows, not from careful evaluation, but from repetition of favorable results. This belief is dangerous because environments change, circumstances shift, competition evolves, and variables rearrange themselves. Your brain, however, prefers continuity. It assumes the rules that once rewarded you will continue to do so, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Emotionally, this lie creates overconfidence and blind spots. It encourages risk without reflection and discourages adaptation. Your brain stops asking what needs to change because it believes change is unnecessary. Past success becomes a shield against doubt. What makes this illusion powerful is how reasonable it sounds. Learning from experience is valuable, but your brain goes further, turning experience into certainty. It forgets that success explains the past, not the future, and clings to old victories as if they were guarantees, even as conditions quietly shift beneath your feet. Your brain sees patterns in randomness. Your brain is a pattern-making machine. It is constantly searching for order, meaning, and cause, even when none exist. Randomness feels uncomfortable because it offers no lesson, no warning, and no sense of control. So your brain connects dots that were never meant to be connected, turning coincidence into narrative. This tendency comes from survival instincts. Detecting patterns once helped humans anticipate danger and opportunity. Seeing a connection, even a false one, was safer than missing a real threat. Your brain still operates with that bias, preferring a wrong explanation over no explanation at all. Emotionally, patterns create relief. When events feel linked, the world feels predictable. A streak of bad luck becomes a sign. A repeated number feels meaningful. A coincidence starts to feel like confirmation. Your brain interprets these perceived patterns as guidance, even though they are often statistical noise. Once a pattern is noticed, your brain becomes selective. It remembers the hits and forgets the misses. Every time the pattern appears again, it feels stronger and more convincing. When it doesn't, your brain dismisses it as an exception. This selective memory gives randomness a false sense of intention. This distortion influences decisions quietly. You avoid risks because of a bad streak. You feel confident because of a lucky phase. You assign meaning to timing, symbols, or sequences that have no real power. Your brain isn't seeking truth in these moments, it's seeking comfort. By imposing order on chaos, it creates the illusion that events are speaking to you, when in reality, randomness doesn't send messages, and meaning is something your brain insists on creating, even when it isn't there. Your brain misjudges how long tasks will take. Your brain is overly optimistic about the future version of you. When you plan a task, your brain imagines smooth progress, steady focus, and no interruptions. It visualizes the best-case scenario and quietly treats it as the most likely one. Delays, fatigue, mistakes, and distractions are edited out because they complicate the story and threaten motivation. This misjudgment happens because your brain plans in abstractions but executes in reality. When thinking ahead, it sees the task as a clean sequence of steps. When doing the task, it encounters friction, uncertainty, and mental resistance. The gap between imagined effort and actual effort is where time disappears. Emotionally, this creates a cycle of frustration and self-blame. When tasks take longer than expected, your brain doesn't question the estimate, it questions you. It interprets delay as laziness or incompetence, not as a predictable error in planning. This erodes confidence and makes future planning even more stressful. Your brain also ignores past evidence. Even when similar tasks consistently take longer, your brain insists this time will be different. It treats each plan as a fresh start, protecting hope at the expense of accuracy. Remembering previous overruns feels discouraging, so your brain minimizes them. What makes this lie powerful is that optimism feels productive. Believing something will be quick reduces resistance and gets you started. But once reality intrudes, the emotional cost arrives. Your brain wanted to motivate you, not mislead you, yet by underestimating time, it creates pressure, guilt, and rushed decisions. The task becomes heavier not because it is hard, but because your brain promised a version of the future that never existed. Your brain mistakes mental ease for truth. Your brain loves anything that feels smooth. When an idea is easy to process, easy to understand, or easy to recall, your brain interprets that ease as a signal that the idea is correct. Effortless thinking feels clean and reliable, so your brain assumes it must also be accurate. This happens because mental effort is uncomfortable. Struggle signals uncertainty, and uncertainty feels risky. When information flows without resistance, your brain relaxes, rewarding itself with a sense of confidence. That confidence has nothing to do with truth, but it feels convincing enough to stop further examination. Familiar words, simple explanations, and clear narratives all create this illusion. The more fluent an idea feels, the more your brain trusts it. Complex or challenging information feels suspicious, not because it's wrong, but because it demands energy. Your brain prefers comfort over correction. Emotion deepens this effect. Mental ease produces calm, and calm feels like understanding. When something feels obvious, your brain treats doubt as unnecessary friction. Questioning would disturb the smoothness, so it resists. This is why slogans feel truer than data, and why simple stories overpower nuanced reality. Over time, your brain builds a preference for ideas that go down easily. It confuses clarity with correctness and simplicity with truth. Difficult ideas are dismissed as overthinking, while comfortable ones become beliefs. Your brain thinks it is being efficient, conserving energy, and reducing stress, but by mistaking mental ease for truth, it quietly lowers its standards. It accepts what feels good to think instead of what is accurate, leaving you confident in ideas that were never tested, only processed smoothly. Your brain exaggerates worst-case scenarios. Your brain is constantly scanning for danger, and when uncertainty appears, it fills the gap with the most threatening story it can imagine. Ambiguity makes your brain uneasy, so it rushes to conclusions that feel urgent and dramatic. The worst-case scenario arrives quickly, fully formed, and emotionally charged, even when the likelihood is small. This tendency comes from survival wiring. Long ago, assuming the worst kept humans alive. If you imagined a rustle in the bushes was a predator, you survived more often than if you dismissed it. Your brain still follows that rule, even though most modern threats are psychological, social, or abstract rather than physical. Emotion amplifies this effect. Fear sharpens attention and makes imagined outcomes feel vivid and real. Once your brain visualizes a negative future, it reacts as if that future is already unfolding. Your body tenses, your thoughts narrow, and logic becomes secondary to self-protection. What makes this lie powerful is how convincing it feels. The more detailed the imagined disaster, the more plausible it seems. Your brain mistakes vividness for probability. Calm, neutral outcomes feel boring and unsafe by comparison, so they are ignored. Over time, this exaggeration trains your brain to expect catastrophe. Small uncertainties become threats, and minor risks feel overwhelming. Your brain believes it is preparing you, but it is actually exhausting you, keeping you stuck in anticipation rather than action. The worst-case story feels responsible and cautious, but it quietly steals peace and clarity. Your brain isn't predicting the future, it's rehearsing fear. And once fear takes the lead, possibility shrinks, perspective collapses, and the imagined danger feels more real than the present moment you are actually in. Your brain believes emotional intensity equals importance. Your brain uses emotion as a shortcut for meaning. When something feels intense, urgent, or overwhelming, your brain assumes it must be significant. Strong emotion becomes a signal that says, "Pay attention, this matters." The problem is that intensity measures reaction, not value, but your brain treats them as the same thing. This belief comes from how emotions evolved. Intense feelings once accompanied real threats and opportunities. Fear meant danger was close. Excitement meant reward was near. Your brain learned to prioritize whatever triggered the strongest response. That wiring still runs even when the emotion is caused by thoughts, memories, or imagined futures rather than real events. Emotionally, this lie is gripping because it hijacks focus. A single upsetting comment outweighs 10 neutral ones. A moment of anxiety feels more important than weeks of stability. Your brain zooms in on what hurts or excites most and declares it meaningful, even if it's temporary or misleading. Intensity also distorts perspective. When emotions spike, your brain narrows its field of view. It ignores context, long-term consequences, and alternative explanations. Everything becomes about the feeling itself. The louder the emotion, the more your brain insists you act on it now. This distortion shapes decisions and memories. You replay intense moments, believing they reveal deep truths about yourself or others. Calm, steady experiences fade because they don't trigger the same reaction. Your brain isn't asking whether something is truly important. It's asking how strongly it makes you feel. And by equating intensity with meaning, it convinces you that the loudest emotions deserve the most power, even when they are the least reliable guides. Your brain assumes more information always helps. Your brain equates knowledge with safety. When faced with uncertainty, it reaches for more facts, more opinions, more data, believing that clarity will eventually emerge if you just keep collecting. The act of gathering information feels productive, so your brain mistakes accumulation for progress and motion for direction. This assumption exists because uncertainty is emotionally uncomfortable. Not knowing triggers anxiety, and information soothes that anxiety by creating the illusion of control. Each new detail feels like a step closer to certainty, even when it adds noise instead of insight. Your brain doesn't pause to ask whether the information is useful, only whether it reduces discomfort. Emotionally, this creates overload. Too much information blurs priorities, slows decisions, and increases doubt. Conflicting details compete for attention, and your brain becomes paralyzed, unable to distinguish what matters from what is merely available. What began as a search for clarity turns into confusion disguised as thoroughness. Your brain also uses information as a shield. By continuing to research, compare, and analyze, it delays commitment. Action feels risky, but gathering information feels safe. This allows your brain to avoid responsibility while still feeling responsible. You're preparing, not procrastinating, even as momentum fades. What makes this lie especially convincing is that learning is genuinely valuable. Your brain borrows that truth and applies it everywhere, ignoring context. But insight doesn't scale linearly with input. At some point, more information stops illuminating and starts obscuring. Your brain believes it is being careful, but it is often being avoidant. By assuming more information always helps, it confuses readiness with certainty and preparation with progress. The decision never arrives because your brain keeps feeding itself data, chasing a feeling of safety that no amount of information can permanently provide. Your brain confuses speed with intelligence. Your brain is impressed by quickness. When an answer comes fast, when words arrive without hesitation, or when decisions are made instantly, your brain interprets that speed as a sign of intelligence. Slowness feels like uncertainty, and uncertainty feels like weakness, so your brain equates rapid response with mental strength. This confusion comes from how fluency feels internally. Fast thinking produces a rush of confidence, a sense of control, and emotional certainty. Your brain mistakes that internal smoothness for competence. It ignores the possibility that speed can come from habit, guesswork, or shallow processing rather than understanding. Emotion reinforces this illusion. Quick answers reduce anxiety by closing questions quickly. Your brain experiences relief when ambiguity disappears, and it attributes that relief to being right. Deliberation, on the other hand, feels uncomfortable. Pauses feel like vulnerability, so your brain frames them as lack of intelligence rather than caution. Social feedback strengthens this bias. Fast speakers and decisive actors often receive approval and attention, which your brain absorbs as evidence. Over time, it learns to associate hesitation with failure and immediacy with competence, even when the opposite is true. What makes this lie persistent is memory. Your brain remembers moments when fast answers worked and forgets the quiet errors they caused. Careful thinking rarely feels dramatic, so it doesn't stand out. Your brain believes it is rewarding sharpness, but it is often rewarding impatience. By confusing speed with intelligence, it undervalues depth, reflection, and accuracy, pushing you to respond quickly rather than wisely, and to feel smart in the moment instead of being right in the long run. Your brain mistakes familiarity for safety. Your brain relaxes around what it recognizes. The familiar feels predictable, and predictability feels safe. When something looks, sounds, or feels known, your brain lowers its defenses, even if that thing has harmed you before. Safety, in your brain's logic, is not about outcomes. It's about expectation. This bias comes from the way your brain manages uncertainty. The unfamiliar demands attention, analysis, and energy. It introduces unknown risks, and your brain dislikes unknowns more than known pain. If it understands what to expect, it feels in control, even when the situation itself is damaging. Emotionally, familiarity creates comfort. Patterns, routines, and repeated experiences reduce anxiety because they remove surprise. Your brain confuses that emotional comfort with actual protection. It would rather stay in a situation it can predict than step into one it cannot, even if the new option is objectively safer or healthier. This is why people stay in unhealthy environments, repeat the same mistakes, or cling to roles that limit them. Your brain tells you that leaving is dangerous because it cannot simulate what comes next. The known discomfort feels manageable, while the unknown possibility feels threatening. What makes this lie powerful is that it feels rational. Familiarity gives the illusion of control. Your brain believes that knowing how something hurts is better than risking how something else might. Over time, this turns comfort into a cage. The familiar becomes a default refuge, not because it is safe, but because your brain has learned its shape. And once safety is defined by recognition instead of well-being, growth begins to feel like danger, even when it's the path away from harm. Your brain ignores base rates. Your brain prefers stories over statistics. When faced with a specific example, a vivid case, or a personal narrative, it zooms in and forgets the broader context it belongs to. Base rates, the underlying probabilities that describe how often something actually happens, feel abstract and cold, so your brain quietly sets them aside. This happens because your brain evolved to learn from experience, not from numbers. A single dramatic event feels more real than thousands of quiet outcomes. If you hear about someone who succeeded against the odds, your brain treats that story as evidence. Even if the odds themselves remain unchanged, the exception becomes more convincing than the rule. Emotionally, this lie is persuasive because it feels human. Statistics don't trigger emotion, but stories do. Your brain confuses emotional resonance with relevance. It assumes that if something feels striking, it must be likely. Fear and hope both amplify this effect, pulling your attention away from what usually happens and toward what could happen. Ignoring base rates distorts judgment. You overestimate rare dangers because they're memorable, and you underestimate common risks because they're boring. Your brain reacts strongly to anecdotes while dismissing quiet patterns that actually predict outcomes. This distortion affects decisions about health, money, relationships, and risk. You feel special, different, exempt from averages. Because averages don't feel personal, your brain resists the idea that general rules apply to you. By ignoring base rates, it trades accuracy for emotional clarity, choosing what feels meaningful over what is statistically true, and leaving you confident in conclusions that rest on compelling stories rather than the reality of how often things really occur. Your brain remembers highlights instead of totals. Your brain does not store experiences evenly. It compresses time by keeping only what stood out emotionally, the peak moments and the ending, while quietly discarding everything in between. Long stretches of neutrality vanish, and a single intense moment is allowed to represent the whole. What you remember feels complete, but it is only a highlight reel. This happens because your brain is built to conserve space and energy. Recording every detail would be inefficient, so it saves what felt strongest. Emotional spikes act like bookmarks. Joy, pain, embarrassment, excitement, and relief become anchors, while steady effort, consistency, and gradual progress fade into the background. Emotionally, this distorts how you judge your life. A relationship can be mostly supportive, yet a few painful arguments define it in memory. A long project filled with steady improvement can feel like a failure because of one bad ending. Your brain doesn't ask how much was good or bad, it asks what was most intense. This lie shapes future decisions. You avoid experiences that ended poorly, even if most of the journey was positive. You chase things that produced a brief high, even if they drained you over time. Your brain optimizes for remembered emotion, not lived reality. What makes this especially dangerous is how convincing memory feels. Recollection carries confidence. It feels like evidence, but your brain isn't lying maliciously. It's simplifying. It reduces complexity into something emotionally manageable. Over time, this trains you to misjudge effort, happiness, and meaning. You forget how much you endured, how much you grew, how much consistency mattered. The totals disappear, replaced by peaks and endings. Your brain believes it is telling you the truth about your experiences, but it is really telling you the most dramatic version, quietly teaching you to value intensity over depth and moments over meaning. Your brain believes change will be harder than it is. Your brain exaggerates the cost of change before you even begin. The moment change appears, your brain floods you with images of effort, discomfort, and failure, making the process feel overwhelming in advance. It treats the unknown as dangerous and the familiar as safe, even when the familiar is painful. This belief comes from your brain's desire to conserve energy. Change requires learning, adjustment, and uncertainty, all of which demand mental resources. To protect itself, your brain inflates the difficulty, hoping you'll stay where you are. The fear feels like realism, but it's actually resistance. Emotionally, anticipation is heavier than action. Your brain focuses on imagined struggle rather than lived experience. It magnifies the starting cost and ignores how quickly humans adapt. Once change begins, the discomfort often shrinks, but your brain never accounts for this in advance. Memory also plays a role. Your brain recalls past attempts at change selectively, highlighting the hardest moments and forgetting the adaptation that followed. This creates a distorted forecast where effort feels endless instead of temporary. What keeps this lie powerful is how protective it feels. Your brain frames avoidance as wisdom, telling you that waiting, delaying, or staying put is sensible. It disguises fear as logic. Your brain thinks it is keeping you safe from strain, but it is often trapping you in unnecessary stagnation. By convincing you that change will be unbearable, it prevents you from discovering that most difficulty lies not in the doing, but in the imagining, and that once you move, your capacity expands faster than your fear ever predicted. Your brain believes staying the same has no cost. Your brain treats inaction as neutral. When you don't change, don't decide, or don't move, it feels like nothing is happening. There is no immediate discomfort, no visible loss, and no clear consequence. That absence of pain convinces your brain that staying the same is safe, or at least harmless. This belief is deeply emotional. Change introduces uncertainty, effort, and the risk of regret. Your brain weighs those risks heavily because they are immediate and vivid. The cost of staying the same, however, is delayed and invisible. It doesn't announce itself, so your brain ignores it. What cannot be felt right now is treated as if it doesn't exist. Over time, this creates an illusion of stability. Your brain assumes that maintaining the current path preserves everything you have. It doesn't register missed opportunities, slow decline, or unrealized potential as losses. Those costs accumulate quietly without triggering alarm. Emotionally, this lie offers relief. Choosing not to act feels like avoiding a mistake. Your brain frames passivity as caution and patience, even when it is driven by fear. Doing nothing feels reversible, while action feels permanent. What makes this illusion dangerous is that reality doesn't pause just because you do. Environments change, skills fade, relationships shift, and opportunities close whether you act or not. Your brain fails to account for this movement because it equates stillness with safety. By the time the cost of staying the same becomes obvious, it often feels irreversible. Your brain then experiences shock, regret, or confusion, wondering how things changed without a clear moment of decision. The truth it avoided is that inaction is a choice with consequences, and staying the same is not free, it simply charges interest quietly over time. Your brain discounts slow, gradual threats. Your brain is tuned to react to what is loud, sudden, and immediate. Slow changes barely register. When a threat creeps in gradually, your brain treats it as background noise, something that can be dealt with later. If there's no sharp spike of fear, it assumes there's no real danger. This bias comes from how your brain learned to survive. Immediate threats required fast reactions. A predator, a fall, a sudden conflict demanded attention now. Gradual risks didn't trigger the same alarm systems, so your brain never learned to treat them with urgency. That wiring still dominates, even when the most damaging threats unfold quietly over time. Emotionally, slow threats feel manageable because they don't hurt all at once. Small declines feel harmless in isolation. One skipped habit, one ignored warning, one minor compromise doesn't register as a problem. Your brain resets its sense of normal again and again, adjusting to slightly worse conditions without sounding an alarm. This is how problems grow unnoticed. Health erodes gradually, relationships weaken quietly, stress accumulates slowly. Your brain interprets each small step as insignificant, never adding them together into a larger picture. Because nothing feels urgent, nothing feels important enough to act on. What makes this lie dangerous is delay. Your brain assumes there will be a clear moment when action becomes necessary, a breaking point that will force change. Often, that moment never arrives. By the time the damage is obvious, it's already deep. Your brain isn't ignoring reality on purpose. It's prioritizing emotional comfort over long-term safety. Sudden pain gets attention, slow damage gets normalized, and by the time your brain finally recognizes the threat, it no longer feels gradual. It feels overwhelming, leaving you wondering how something so serious appeared without warning when it was quietly building the entire time. Your brain trusts authority figures too readily. Your brain is comforted by hierarchy. When someone carries a title, wears a uniform, speaks with certainty, or occupies a position of power, your brain relaxes. It assumes that responsibility implies competence and that authority implies knowledge. This shortcut saves effort. Questioning takes energy, but trusting feels efficient and safe. This tendency is rooted in survival. For most of human history, following leaders reduced risk. Those who deferred to experienced figures were more likely to survive than those who challenged every instruction. Your brain still carries that wiring, even in environments where authority is no longer a reliable signal of truth or care. Emotionally, authority reduces uncertainty. When someone else appears in charge, your brain hands over responsibility. Doubt quiets down. Anxiety softens. You feel guided rather than exposed. That emotional relief becomes proof that trust is warranted, even when evidence is thin or absent. This lie becomes dangerous when authority replaces thinking. Your brain stops evaluating arguments and starts evaluating status. Who said it matters more than what was said? Confidence delivered from above feels more convincing than careful reasoning delivered from the side. You accept explanations you would question if they came from a peer. Your brain also fears social cost. Challenging authority risks rejection, punishment, or isolation. Agreement feels safer than dissent, so your brain frames obedience as wisdom and skepticism as recklessness. Silence becomes compliance without conscious choice. What makes this lie powerful is how invisible it feels. Trusting authority doesn't feel like surrender. It feels like common sense. But your brain is not assessing truth. It is responding to symbols of power. In doing so, it trades judgment for reassurance, allowing authority to stand in for evidence and comfort to stand in for critical thought. Your brain assumes confidence means certainty. Your brain is drawn to confidence because it feels stabilizing. When someone speaks with conviction or when a thought arrives without hesitation, your brain interprets that certainty as evidence of truth. Doubt feels unsafe, so confidence becomes a shortcut, a signal that the answer must be solid simply because it is delivered firmly. This assumption is rooted in your brain's need for predictability. Certainty reduces anxiety by closing open loops. When something sounds confident, your brain relaxes, believing the question has been resolved. It confuses emotional reassurance with factual accuracy, mistaking how something feels to hear for how true it actually is. Emotion plays a central role here. Confidence carries authority. It triggers trust, even when it's unsupported. Your brain responds to tone, posture, and decisiveness more strongly than to evidence, because those cues once indicated leadership and safety. A confident voice feels like protection, so your brain lowers its defenses. What makes this lie especially dangerous is that confidence is easy to fake. Your brain rarely asks how certainty was earned. It focuses on how convincingly it is expressed. Hesitation, nuance, or careful language feel weaker by comparison, even though they often signal deeper understanding. Over time, this bias reshapes how you judge yourself as well. When you feel uncertain, your brain interprets it as incompetence rather than honesty. You begin to distrust your own careful thinking and overvalue snap judgments that feel bold. Your brain believes it is choosing strength over confusion, but by assuming confidence means certainty, it replaces accuracy with assurance. It rewards conviction instead of correctness, leaving you persuaded by how firmly something is stated rather than how carefully it is understood. Your brain misreads coincidences as signals. Your brain is obsessed with meaning. When two events line up in an unexpected way, it feels intentional, almost personal. Randomness makes your brain uncomfortable, so it searches for patterns that explain why things happen when they do. A coincidence feels too precise, too timed, too emotionally relevant to be dismissed as chance. This instinct comes from pattern recognition, one of your brain's most powerful survival tools. Seeing connections once helped humans predict danger and opportunity. Your brain still uses that same machinery, even when the environment is filled with noise, data, and random overlap. It would rather invent meaning than accept that some things simply happen without a reason. Emotion amplifies this effect. Coincidences that occur during emotionally charged moments feel especially significant. Your brain links the timing to your feelings and treats the overlap as confirmation. It feels like a message, a warning, or a sign pointing you toward a conclusion you were already leaning toward. This is where coincidence turns into belief. Your brain stops asking how likely the event was and starts asking what it means. It ignores all the times nothing lined up and focuses intensely on the one moment that did. That selective attention makes randomness feel purposeful. What makes this lie compelling is how validating it feels. Signals imply guidance, order, and control. Your brain enjoys the idea that events are connected in a way that centers you, but in doing so, it overinterprets noise as information. Coincidences become instructions, patterns become predictions, and chance quietly disguises itself as insight, steering your decisions not through evidence, but through the comfort of perceived meaning. Your brain believes personal stories over data. Your brain is moved by people, not numbers. A single personal story can outweigh mountains of data because stories feel alive. They have faces, emotions, and consequences you can imagine. Data feels distant, abstract, and cold, so your brain struggles to emotionally engage with it, even when it is far more accurate. This bias exists because your brain evolved to learn socially. Long before charts and statistics existed, knowledge was passed through stories. Who survived, who failed, who made a mistake, who succeeded. Your brain still treats narratives as trusted signals, while numbers feel unnatural and detached from real life. Emotionally, stories bypass skepticism. When you hear someone's experience, your brain empathizes, placing you in their position. That emotional simulation feels like evidence. Data doesn't create the same internal experience, so your brain subconsciously devalues it, even when it describes reality more reliably. Once a story resonates, your brain uses it as a reference point. It generalizes one experience into a rule and applies it broadly, ignoring how rare or unrepresentative it might be. Contradictory data feels less convincing because it lacks emotional weight. This distortion shapes beliefs about risk, success, and morality. You overestimate dangers because of vivid anecdotes and underestimate probabilities because statistics don't linger in memory. Your brain isn't asking which source is more accurate, it's asking which one feels real. By choosing stories over data, it trades precision for connection, convincing you that what moved you most must also be what's true, even when emotion and reality are telling very different stories. Your brain assumes intentions matter more than outcomes. Your brain is deeply attached to the story behind your actions. When you intend well, it feels morally satisfying, and that satisfaction becomes a shield. If the outcome causes harm, your brain softens the impact by returning to the intention, using it as evidence that you are still a good person. What you meant to do feels more important than what actually happened. This bias exists because intentions are internal and familiar. You feel them clearly. Outcomes, especially negative ones, arrive from the outside and threaten your self-image. Your brain protects identity by prioritizing motive over result, reframing mistakes as misunderstandings rather than consequences. Emotionally, this creates distance from responsibility. Guilt feels unbearable, so your brain redirects attention to effort and meaning. "I didn't mean it" becomes a way to reduce discomfort, even if it doesn't reduce damage. The emotional relief is immediate, which reinforces the habit. Your brain also extends this generosity inward more than outward. When others cause harm, outcomes matter. When you cause harm, context and intent suddenly become crucial. This double standard feels fair because you have access to your own thoughts, struggles, and emotions, while others remain opaque. What makes this lie powerful is how human it feels. Intentions do matter in relationships, but your brain inflates their importance to avoid facing uncomfortable truths. It uses intention as a moral currency, paying down the emotional debt of harm without actually repairing it. By focusing on what you meant instead of what occurred, your brain delays growth. Feedback feels like accusation, and consequences feel unfair. Responsibility becomes negotiable. Your brain believes it is protecting your character, but in doing so, it quietly disconnects you from impact, turning learning into defensiveness and accountability into something to be explained away rather than faced. Your brain believes effort alone guarantees results. Your brain wants the world to be fair. It clings to the idea that hard work must lead to success because that belief makes effort feel safe and meaningful. If trying harder guarantees results, then failure can always be avoided. This illusion is comforting, and your brain protects it fiercely. Emotionally, effort feels virtuous. When you struggle, sacrifice, or push yourself, your brain rewards you with a sense of moral credit. That feeling quietly turns into expectation. You begin to feel that results are owed to you, not because of strategy, timing, or conditions, but because you worked for them. This belief comes from your brain's need for control. Accepting that outcomes depend on chance, environment, or unseen variables is unsettling. So your brain simplifies reality into a direct equation. Effort equals success. When the outcome doesn't match the effort, your brain experiences confusion and frustration, not curiosity. What makes this lie powerful is how identity gets involved. If effort defines your worth, then questioning the guarantee feels like questioning your value. Your brain resists this by blaming circumstances, others, or yourself, rather than the belief itself. Over time, this distortion leads to burnout and disappointment. Your brain pushes you to work harder instead of smarter, longer instead of differently. It ignores feedback that suggests adjustment because effort feels like the correct response to everything. Your brain thinks it is motivating you, but by believing effort alone guarantees results, it blinds you to reality. It replaces learning with persistence and strategy with struggle, leaving you exhausted, confused, and wondering why doing everything right still didn't lead where you were promised it would. Your brain confuses loudness with correctness. Your brain is drawn to intensity. When an idea is delivered with volume, force, or emotional certainty, it feels powerful. That power creates the illusion of confidence, and your brain mistakes confidence for accuracy. A loud voice, a bold claim, or an aggressive stance signals dominance, and dominance has long been associated with survival and leadership. This bias comes from social hierarchy wiring. Historically, those who spoke forcefully often controlled resources and direction. Your brain learned to associate strength of expression with reliability. Even now, when evidence should matter more than tone, your brain reacts first to how something is said, not what is said. Emotion plays a key role. Loudness triggers attention and suppresses doubt. It overwhelms your internal questioning by creating urgency and pressure. In the presence of certainty delivered at full volume, hesitation feels weak and unsafe. Your brain chooses alignment over resistance. This is why quiet, nuanced ideas often struggle to compete with simple, forceful ones. Loudness compresses complexity into certainty. Your brain prefers that simplicity because it reduces mental effort and emotional ambiguity. Questioning feels exhausting when an answer is being shouted. What makes this lie dangerous is how invisible it is. Your brain tells you that you were persuaded by logic, not volume. It rationalizes agreement after the fact, even if the argument lacked substance. Over time, this bias shapes what you trust. You begin to associate strength with truth and calm with uncertainty. But loudness is not evidence, and certainty is not accuracy. Your brain confuses the energy of delivery with the quality of information, allowing the most forceful voice in the room to feel right, even when it's wrong. Your brain believes regret is always rational. Your brain treats regret like evidence. When a painful outcome appears, it assumes the feeling of regret must be pointing to a mistake that could have been avoided. The stronger the regret, the more convinced your brain becomes that a better choice was obvious and within reach. But regret doesn't measure decision quality. It measures emotional pain after the fact. This belief is powered by hindsight. Once you know how things turned out, your brain reconstructs the past as if the outcome was predictable. It erases uncertainty, forgotten information, and constraints that existed at the moment of choice. What was once a reasonable decision made with limited knowledge is rewritten as a clear error. Regret feels justified because your brain is judging the past with information it never had at the time. Emotionally, regret is persuasive because it hurts. Pain demands meaning, and your brain supplies it by assigning blame to your earlier self. This creates the illusion that self-punishment is in sight. The discomfort convinces you that regret is teaching you something essential, even when it's only teaching you to be harsher with yourself. Your brain also ignores randomness. It assumes different choices guarantee different outcomes, overlooking how much chance, timing, and external forces shape results. Regret simplifies reality into a single fork in the road, where one path leads to pain and the other to relief. This distortion affects future decisions. You become cautious not because you learned wisely, but because you fear repeating imagined certainty. Your brain clings to regret because it feels logical and corrective. But often regret isn't a signal of poor judgment. It's a response to outcomes that no amount of foresight could have controlled, dressed up as wisdom after the fact. Your brain assumes emotions are permanent. Your brain treats intense emotions as if they define reality rather than momentary states. When you feel overwhelmed, anxious, or hopeless, your brain projects that feeling forward, convincing you that this is how things are and how they will remain. The present emotion fills the entire mental landscape, leaving no room for change. This happens because emotions are embodied experiences. They affect your breathing, posture, and attention, making them feel undeniable. Your brain interprets this physical intensity as permanence. If it feels this strong now, it must be lasting. The absence of immediate relief becomes proof that nothing will shift. Emotionally, this lie is suffocating. Temporary sadness turns into a belief that joy is unreachable. Brief anxiety becomes a narrative of fragility. Your brain confuses duration with intensity, assuming that strong emotions must also be long-lived. It forgets that emotions are responses, not conditions. This distortion also shapes decisions. When your brain believes a feeling will last, it avoids risks, cancels plans, and narrows possibilities. Why try if this heaviness is permanent? Why hope if this tension never fades? The future is filtered through the current emotional state. What keeps this lie alive is memory. Your brain recalls similar emotions from the past and stacks them together, creating the illusion of continuity. It ignores the countless emotional shifts that happened quietly, without announcement. Your brain isn't predicting accurately, it's extrapolating emotionally. It assumes the present is a preview of the future. But emotions are fluid, even when they feel fixed. By treating them as permanent, your brain turns passing states into identities, convincing you that what you feel now is who you are, and quietly shrinking the horizon of what feels possible. Your brain believes what protects identity. Your brain is deeply invested in who you think you are. When information supports that identity, it feels safe and affirming. When it threatens it, your brain reacts defensively, not by evaluating the information, but by rejecting it. Truth becomes secondary to self-protection. This happens because identity is emotional, not logical. Your brain ties beliefs to belonging, self-worth, and consistency. Admitting you're wrong doesn't just feel like a correction, it feels like a fracture. So your brain filters reality, favoring ideas that preserve the story you tell about yourself. Emotion sharpens this bias. Agreement produces comfort and pride, while contradiction triggers discomfort and shame. Your brain treats that discomfort as danger, pushing you to dismiss, rationalize, or attack anything that challenges your identity. The stronger the identity, the stronger the resistance. Over time, beliefs stop being tools for understanding and become armor. Your brain selectively gathers evidence, remembers supportive examples, and forgets contradictions. This creates an internal echo chamber where you feel informed but are actually insulated. What makes this lie powerful is how invisible it is. Your brain doesn't announce that it's protecting identity. It presents its conclusions as objective and rational. You feel certain, not defensive, even as evidence is quietly ignored. Your brain believes it is preserving stability, but it is often preserving illusion. By believing what protects identity, it trades growth for consistency. It keeps you feeling intact while slowly narrowing your view of reality, convincing you that being right matters more than becoming wiser. Your brain downplays unlikely but severe risks. Your brain is uncomfortable holding two ideas at once, low probability and high impact. When a risk is unlikely, your brain relaxes, even if the consequences would be devastating. It focuses on how rarely the event occurs rather than on what would happen if it did. This creates a false sense of security built on odds, not outcomes. This bias exists because your brain is designed to manage daily survival, not rare catastrophes. Constantly worrying about extreme possibilities would be mentally exhausting, so your brain filters them out to preserve emotional stability. If something doesn't happen often, it stops feeling real. Emotionally, your brain uses distance as a shield. Severe risks that haven't happened to you feel abstract, almost hypothetical. Without personal experience or vivid imagery, your brain struggles to generate fear or urgency. It treats the threat as intellectually interesting but emotionally irrelevant. At the same time, your brain is overly reactive to small, frequent dangers because they feel immediate and tangible. It confuses frequency with importance. Rare but catastrophic outcomes are pushed aside because they don't demand constant attention. What makes this lie dangerous is how reasonable it feels. Your brain tells you that worrying about unlikely events is irrational or paranoid. It frames preparedness as overreaction. But in doing so, it ignores asymmetry, the fact that a single occurrence can outweigh years of calm. By downplaying severe risks, your brain protects your peace in the short term while exposing you in the long term. It prefers comfort over caution, probability over impact, and when the unlikely finally happens, it feels shocking, not because it was unimaginable, but because your brain chose not to imagine it at all. Your brain overestimates the pain of rejection. Your brain treats rejection as a threat far larger than it actually is. The moment rejection becomes possible, your brain simulates the pain in advance, amplifying it until it feels unbearable. This imagined suffering feels so real that avoiding rejection starts to feel like self-preservation rather than fear. This exaggeration is rooted in social survival. For most of human history, rejection from the group meant loss of safety, resources, and belonging. Your brain still carries that ancient alarm system, even though modern rejection rarely carries the same consequences. A declined invitation, a missed opportunity, or a disapproving response activates the same circuitry as social exile. Emotionally, anticipation is the worst part. Your brain projects rejection as humiliating, permanent, and identity-defining. It tells you that you won't recover, that others will remember, and that the pain will linger. What it doesn't show you is how quickly emotional pain fades once the moment passes. Your brain also underestimates resilience. It forgets how often you've already survived disappointment, embarrassment, and disapproval. Instead of recalling recovery, it fixates on the imagined impact. Fear becomes proof. This distortion quietly shapes behavior. You stay silent, avoid risk, and lower your expectations to protect yourself from pain that is mostly hypothetical. Relief from avoidance reinforces the lie, teaching your brain that not trying is safer than being rejected. What your brain refuses to calculate is the cost of avoidance. Rejection hurts briefly. Regret lingers, but your brain focuses on immediate emotional spikes, not long-term consequences. By inflating the pain of rejection, it convinces you that safety lies in invisibility, even when the real damage comes from never allowing yourself to be seen at all. Your brain believes the present self will not change. Your brain treats who you are right now as a finished version rather than a temporary state. The preferences, habits, fears, and beliefs you currently hold feel stable, almost permanent, so your brain assumes future you will think, feel, and want the same things. Change is acknowledged in theory but discounted emotionally. This happens because imagining transformation requires mental simulation, and your brain resists that effort. The present self is familiar and concrete. Future versions are abstract and uncertain. Your brain anchors identity to what feels real now and treats growth as an exception rather than the default. Emotionally, this creates rigid decisions. You commit as if today's motivations will last forever. You avoid opportunities because they don't fit who you think you are now. Discomfort feels permanent, so quitting feels rational. Your brain confuses temporary resistance with long-term incompatibility. This lie also distorts regret. When you look back, your brain forgets how different you once were. It judges past choices using current values, creating shame or disbelief. How could I ever have wanted that? Feels confusing because your brain erases evidence of change while living it. What strengthens this illusion is emotional consistency. When feelings repeat for a while, your brain labels them as traits. A phase becomes an identity. A mood becomes a personality. The longer something lasts, the more permanent it feels. Your brain isn't predicting accurately, it's freezing the present. It assumes stability because stability feels safe. But people are defined by change, not constancy. By believing the present self will not change, your brain narrows future possibilities, locking you into decisions, fears, and limits that were never meant to last, quietly mistaking who you are now for who you will always be. Your brain assumes explanations are causes. Your brain is satisfied the moment something makes sense. When an explanation sounds coherent, your brain treats it as if the mystery is solved, even when nothing has actually been proven. Understanding feels like control, so your brain confuses having a story with having a cause. This happens because explanations reduce uncertainty. They organize chaos into something orderly and familiar. Your brain relaxes once it can label a reason, mistaking narrative clarity for causal truth. The explanation feels complete, so your brain stops searching. Emotion strengthens this illusion. A good explanation provides relief. It eases anxiety by answering why, even if the answer is superficial or incorrect. Your brain values that emotional closure more than accuracy, especially when the situation is uncomfortable or complex. Over time, explanations become shortcuts. Your brain learns to accept the first reasonable-sounding reason and move on. It ignores deeper variables, hidden factors, and randomness because they complicate the story. Simple explanations feel smarter than uncertain ones, even when they explain very little. What makes this lie persistent is confidence. Once you can explain something, your brain assumes you can predict it. That assumption feels empowering. You feel informed, competent, and prepared, even though the explanation may not actually cause or control the outcome. Your brain believes it has done its job by making things make sense. But by assuming explanations are causes, it stops inquiry too early. It replaces investigation with satisfaction, leaving you confident in stories that feel true, sound logical, and offer comfort, while the real causes remain unseen and unexplored. Your brain mistakes mental rehearsal for action. Your brain responds to imagination more strongly than you realize. When you vividly think through a task, a conversation, or a future outcome, your brain activates many of the same neural pathways as if you were actually doing it. That activation creates a sense of progress, and progress feels rewarding. Your brain releases a small dose of satisfaction, quietly marking the task as partially complete. This is where the confusion begins. Because your brain felt effort and relief, it assumes action has already occurred. Visualizing success, planning steps, or replaying scenarios feels productive, even when nothing has changed in the real world. The emotional payoff arrives early, stealing motivation from the action that was supposed to follow. Emotionally, mental rehearsal feels safe. It allows you to experience control, competence, and readiness without risk or exposure. Your brain prefers this internal simulation because it avoids failure, rejection, or discomfort. Thinking replaces doing, and comfort replaces progress. Over time, this creates a dangerous loop. The more you rehearse mentally, the less urgency your brain feels to act. The task becomes familiar in your mind, and familiarity reduces pressure. Your brain confuses clarity with completion. What makes this lie powerful is that it feels responsible. Planning is praised, visualization is encouraged, and preparation sounds wise. Your brain uses those values to justify delay, but rehearsal without execution is a closed circuit. Nothing moves forward, yet your brain feels busy and accomplished. By mistaking thought for action, your brain protects you from discomfort while quietly keeping you stuck. The future feels close because you've imagined it so often, but imagination does not create change. It only creates the illusion that change is already underway. Your brain assumes clarity equals understanding. Your brain is easily satisfied by explanations that feel clear. When an idea clicks, when words flow smoothly and everything seems to line up, your brain interprets that mental ease as proof of understanding. The absence of confusion feels like mastery, even when the understanding is shallow or incomplete. This assumption comes from how your brain measures effort. Struggle feels like failure, while clarity feels like success. If something is explained simply, your brain relaxes, concluding that it gets it. But simplicity can hide gaps, and fluency can exist without depth. Your brain confuses the feeling of comprehension with the reality of it. Emotionally, clarity is comforting. It removes tension and uncertainty, and your brain craves that relief. Questioning clear explanations reintroduces discomfort, so your brain resists digging deeper. It prefers a clean narrative over a messy truth, even when the mess is where real understanding lives. This is why illusions of knowledge are so persistent. You can follow an explanation, agree with it, and even repeat it without being able to apply it, predict outcomes, or explain it independently. Your brain doesn't test understanding, it trusts the feeling. Once clarity is achieved, curiosity shuts down. Your brain moves on, confident that the work is done. But when faced with real-world complexity, that confidence collapses, leaving confusion and frustration in its place. Your brain isn't trying to mislead you, it's conserving energy. Deep understanding is effortful, slow, and uncomfortable. Clarity is fast and soothing. By equating the two, your brain saves effort in the short term, while quietly leaving you unprepared when surface-level understanding is no longer enough. Your brain overweights first impressions. Your brain makes snap judgments because speed feels protective. In the first moments of meeting someone or encountering something new, it gathers limited information and rushes to a conclusion. That initial assessment feels sharp and intuitive, as if your brain has uncovered a hidden truth. What it has really done is lock on to the earliest available cues and treat them as decisive. This happens because first impressions reduce uncertainty quickly. Not knowing who or what you're dealing with creates tension, and your brain is eager to resolve that discomfort. The first interpretation offers emotional relief, so it is rewarded and reinforced. Questioning it later would reopen uncertainty, which your brain prefers to avoid. Emotionally, first impressions become anchors. Everything that follows is filtered through that initial judgment. Positive impressions soften future mistakes, while negative ones magnify them. Your brain searches for confirmation, not correction, quietly bending new information to fit the original story. This bias also protects ego. Admitting a first impression was wrong feels like admitting poor judgment. Your brain reframes stubbornness as consistency, clinging to early conclusions to preserve confidence. Over time, the impression feels less like a guess and more like a fact. What makes this lie especially persuasive is how fast and effortless it feels. First impressions arrive without conscious effort, which makes them feel honest and unfiltered. But speed is not accuracy, and immediacy is not insight. Your brain believes it is being efficient by trusting early signals, but it is trading depth for closure. People change, context shift, and understanding evolves. Yet your brain keeps returning to that first snapshot. By overweighting first impressions, it mistakes an opening moment for the whole story, quietly limiting curiosity and replacing discovery with certainty before anything meaningful has had time to unfold. Your brain believes the obvious explanation is complete. Your brain is relieved by the first explanation that seems to fit. When something appears obvious, your brain treats it as finished, as if clarity itself is proof of completeness. The ease of understanding creates a false sense of resolution, and your brain quietly stops asking questions. This belief comes from your brain's dislike of uncertainty. Digging deeper requires effort and opens the door to complexity, ambiguity, and doubt. The obvious explanation closes that door. It feels efficient and responsible, even when it only scratches the surface. Your brain prefers a partial answer over an uncomfortable unknown. Emotion reinforces this shortcut. Obvious explanations feel reassuring. They give you the sense that the world is predictable and understandable. Your brain mistakes that comfort for accuracy. When something just makes sense, doubt feels unnecessary and even suspicious. Over time, this habit trains your brain to settle too early. It overlooks hidden factors, long-term influences, and interactions that aren't immediately visible. The obvious explanation becomes a placeholder for truth, defended not because it's complete, but because it's familiar. What makes this lie powerful is how reasonable it sounds. Wanting simple answers feels intelligent, not lazy. Your brain frames further questioning as overthinking rather than curiosity. Your brain believes it is being practical, but by treating the obvious explanation as complete, it trades depth for closure. It stops inquiry at the moment it becomes interesting, leaving you confident in answers that feel satisfying, look neat, and explain just enough to silence curiosity without ever revealing the full reality underneath. Your brain confuses simplicity with accuracy. Your brain craves simplicity because complexity feels heavy. When an explanation is short, clean, and easy to grasp, your brain relaxes. That relief is emotional, not intellectual. Simple answers reduce uncertainty, and uncertainty makes your brain uncomfortable. So when something is easy to understand, your brain quietly labels it as correct. This happens because your brain is constantly conserving energy. Complex explanations demand attention, working memory, and sustained effort. Simple explanations slide in effortlessly, creating a sense of clarity that feels satisfying. Your brain mistakes that clarity for truth. Emotion plays a powerful role here. Simplicity feels reassuring. It makes the world seem orderly and predictable. Complex realities threaten that sense of order, so your brain resists them. It prefers a neat story over a messy one, even if the messy one is more accurate. This is why slogans outcompete nuance, and why confident one-line explanations feel more convincing than careful, conditional ones. Your brain doesn't ask whether the explanation accounts for all variables. It asks whether it feels complete. If the discomfort disappears, it assumes the question has been answered. What makes this lie dangerous is how invisible it is. Your brain tells you that you understand, when in reality, you've only accepted a simplified version of the truth. It confuses reduction with precision and ease with correctness. Over time, this bias shapes belief. Oversimplified ideas harden into certainty, while complex truths are dismissed as overthinking. Your brain avoids depth because depth requires patience and humility. By choosing simplicity, it protects comfort, but it sacrifices accuracy, quietly replacing understanding with something that merely feels clear. Your brain believes more choice leads to happiness. Your brain equates freedom with abundance. When more options are available, it assumes happiness must increase because choice feels like control. The idea of having fewer options triggers discomfort, as if something valuable is being taken away. Your brain tells you that the wider the menu, the better the outcome must be. This belief is rooted in possibility. Each option represents a potential future, and your brain becomes intoxicated by imagining them. But imagining is easier than choosing. Once a decision is required, those possibilities collapse into a single path, and your brain begins to mourn the options left behind. Emotionally, more choice increases pressure. With every additional option, responsibility grows. If the outcome disappoints, your brain has more alternatives to compare against, more what-ifs to replay. Satisfaction erodes not because the choice was bad, but because it wasn't perfect. Your brain frames contentment as settling. Your brain also mistakes deliberation for optimization. Spending more time comparing options feels productive, even when it increases anxiety and doubt. The fear of choosing wrong becomes stronger than the desire to choose well. Decision-making turns into avoidance disguised as analysis. What your brain fails to recognize is adaptation. Happiness depends less on the number of options and more on commitment to the one chosen. Once a path is embraced, satisfaction grows. But your brain keeps scanning for better alternatives, pulling attention away from what you already have. By believing more choice guarantees happiness, your brain creates restlessness. It convinces you that contentment lies just one decision away, while quietly undermining the peace that comes from fully inhabiting the decision you've already made. Your brain mistakes busyness for productivity. Your brain is comforted by movement. When you are busy, responding, switching, checking, and doing, it feels like progress is happening. Activity creates a sense of momentum, and that momentum is emotionally satisfying. Your brain interprets motion as achievement, even when nothing meaningful is actually being completed. This confusion exists because stillness feels risky. Pausing to think, prioritize, or choose direction creates uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers discomfort. Busyness offers an escape. It fills time with tasks that feel urgent, allowing your brain to avoid the harder question of whether those tasks matter. Emotionally, busyness protects self-worth. When you are busy, you feel needed, responsible, and valuable. Your brain uses activity as proof that you are contributing. Rest or focus, on the other hand, can feel lazy or unproductive because they lack visible output, even when they produce better results. This lie also fragments attention. Constant switching gives your brain small hits of completion, each one reinforcing the illusion of progress. But depth is sacrificed. Important work that requires sustained focus feels heavier and is postponed in favor of easier, louder tasks that keep the feeling of busyness alive. What makes this lie dangerous is how socially rewarded it is. Busy people are praised, full schedules are admired. Your brain absorbs this validation and equates exhaustion with effectiveness. The more drained you feel, the more productive you assume you've been. Your brain believes it is keeping you engaged and useful, but it is often keeping you distracted. By mistaking busyness for productivity, it trades impact for activity and progress for noise, convincing you that motion equals meaning, while the work that truly matters waits untouched beneath the surface. Your brain assumes remembering means understanding. Your brain confuses storage with comprehension. When you can recall information easily, it feels like you understand it. But memory is not the same as insight. Your brain treats recall as proof, assuming that if something can be repeated, it must be grasped. This happens because remembering feels fluent. The ease of pulling information from memory creates a sense of mastery. Your brain mistakes that smooth retrieval for deep understanding, even when the knowledge is shallow or disconnected. Being able to say something convincingly feels the same as knowing why it's true. Emotion strengthens this illusion. Remembering provides confidence and reduces anxiety. Your brain rewards recall with certainty, making questioning feel unnecessary. You feel prepared, informed, and capable, even if you couldn't apply the knowledge in a real situation. Over time, this bias shapes learning. Your brain focuses on memorizing rather than integrating. It values familiarity over structure and repetition over connection. This is why information can feel clear until you try to explain it, apply it, or challenge it. What makes this lie persistent is how convincing it feels in the moment. As long as the memory is accessible, your brain assumes competence. Gaps only appear under pressure when recall fails to translate into action or explanation. Your brain believes it is building knowledge, but it is often collecting fragments. By assuming remembering means understanding, it settles for surface-level certainty. It replaces depth with recall, leaving you confident in what you can repeat, while the deeper meaning remains unexamined and fragile. Your brain trusts anecdotes over evidence. Your brain is drawn to what feels human. A single personal story carries faces, emotions, and detail, and those elements make it feel real in a way raw evidence does not. When someone shares an anecdote, your brain steps into the scene, imagines the experience, and reacts as if it has learned something meaningful. Charts and studies remain distant, but stories feel close. This preference comes from how your brain evolved to learn. For most of human history, knowledge was transmitted through shared experiences, not aggregated data. Your brain still treats stories as reliable lessons because they once helped people survive. Evidence, by contrast, feels abstract and emotionally flat, requiring effort to interpret. Emotion gives anecdotes their power. When a story triggers fear, hope, or empathy, your brain assigns it extra weight. It mistakes emotional impact for representativeness. One vivid example begins to feel like a general rule, even when it is statistically rare. What makes this bias strong is memory. Your brain easily recalls stories because they are structured and meaningful. Evidence fades faster because it lacks narrative shape. Over time, what you remember most starts to feel like what happens most. Your brain then builds beliefs around these remembered moments. It doesn't ask how common the outcome is, only how memorable it is. Evidence that contradicts the story feels cold or dismissive, so it's pushed aside. This lie feels natural because it aligns with how your brain understands the world. But in trusting anecdotes over evidence, your brain allows isolated experiences to outweigh reality. It lets emotion stand in for accuracy, shaping decisions and beliefs not by what is true most often, but by what feels most real. Your brain believes moral judgments are objective. Your brain experiences moral judgments as facts, not opinions. When something feels right or wrong, it doesn't register as a personal interpretation, it feels self-evident. The conviction is immediate and emotionally charged, giving the impression that morality is something you're discovering, not something you're constructing. This belief comes from emotion presenting itself as certainty. Moral reactions are often driven by disgust, anger, empathy, or fear, and those emotions arrive before conscious reasoning. Your brain then builds justifications around the feeling, mistaking emotional intensity for universal truth. Because the judgment feels obvious to you, your brain assumes it should feel obvious to everyone. Emotionally, this lie is powerful because it reinforces identity. Seeing your moral views as objective places you on the side of correctness and frames disagreement as ignorance or bad intent. Your brain protects this position because questioning it would feel like questioning who you are. Your brain also ignores context and variation. Cultural norms, personal experiences, incentives, and situations fade into the background. What remains is a simplified moral landscape where actions are good or bad in isolation, stripped of nuance. This makes the world easier to judge but harder to understand. Once a moral stance is labeled objective, curiosity shuts down. Listening feels unnecessary. Compromise feels like betrayal. Your brain treats disagreement as a threat to order rather than an opportunity for insight. This distortion shapes conflict and division. Your brain isn't asking how values differ or why people reason differently. It's defending its certainty. By believing moral judgments are objective, your brain trades humility for conviction, turning complex human behavior into clear categories that feel righteous, even when they obscure more than they reveal. Your brain exaggerates personal responsibility for outcomes. Your brain wants the world to make sense, and the simplest way to do that is to place yourself at the center of cause and effect. When something goes wrong, your brain instinctively searches for what you did, failed to do, or should have known. Responsibility feels cleaner than uncertainty, so your brain inflates your role in outcomes far beyond what is realistic. This happens because control feels safer than randomness. Believing you caused an outcome, even a negative one, is emotionally easier than accepting that many events are shaped by chance, timing, or forces outside your reach. Your brain would rather carry guilt than helplessness. Guilt at least implies influence. Emotionally, this creates a heavy inner narrative. You replay decisions, conversations, and moments, searching for the point where everything could have been different. Your brain frames hindsight as foresight, convincing you that you should have known what was impossible to predict. The past becomes a courtroom where you are both judge and defendant. This lie also distorts success. When things go well, your brain may claim full credit, reinforcing the belief that you are always the primary driver. But when things fail, that same belief turns inward and becomes self-blame. The world shrinks until everything feels like your fault. What keeps this pattern alive is empathy. Caring deeply about outcomes makes responsibility feel moral. Letting go feels like indifference, so your brain over-identifies with results, confusing compassion with control. Your brain believes it is holding you accountable, but it is often punishing you for complexity. By exaggerating personal responsibility, it ignores context, shared influence, and randomness. It turns life into a personal performance review where every outcome reflects who you are rather than what happened, quietly replacing realism with self-judgment and burdening you with weight you were never meant to carry. Your brain believes intentions predict behavior. Your brain wants to trust plans, promises, and good intentions. When you or someone else sincerely intends to act a certain way, your brain treats that intention as a reliable forecast of behavior. Wanting feels like doing, so your brain assumes follow-through is inevitable. This belief exists because intentions are visible and comforting. They signal values, identity, and direction. Your brain prefers them because they are easier to assess than patterns of behavior, which require time, attention, and honesty. Intention feels clean and hopeful, while behavior is messy and unpredictable. Emotion strengthens this illusion. Hearing or forming good intentions creates relief. It soothes guilt, reduces anxiety, and restores a sense of control. Your brain accepts intention as closure, allowing it to stop monitoring for inconsistency or failure. Over time, this bias distorts judgment. Your brain excuses repeated behavior because intentions remain positive. It separates who someone means to be from what they consistently do, giving the benefit of the doubt long after evidence suggests otherwise. What makes this lie dangerous is how it shapes self-perception. Your brain overvalues your plans and underweights your actions. You feel disciplined, kind, or motivated because you intend to be, even when behavior hasn't caught up. Your brain believes it is being fair and optimistic. But by believing intentions predict behavior, it confuses aspiration with reality. It replaces accountability with hope, leaving patterns unchallenged and outcomes unchanged, all while feeling reassured by promises that were never tested against action. Your brain assumes effort must feel hard to count. Your brain equates effort with strain. When something feels exhausting, frustrating, or uncomfortable, your brain labels it as meaningful work. If it feels smooth or natural, it questions whether it really counts. This belief is rooted in the idea that value must be earned through discomfort, not through ease. This assumption comes from conditioning. From an early age, effort is praised when it looks difficult. Struggle becomes proof of commitment. Your brain absorbs this pattern and learns to associate pain with progress. When effort doesn't hurt, it feels suspicious, as if something is missing. Emotionally, this creates guilt around ease. If you accomplish something without suffering, your brain downplays the achievement or credits luck instead of skill. It tells you that real work should feel heavier. This keeps you chasing difficulty, even when it's unnecessary. Over time, your brain begins to distrust efficiency. Methods that reduce friction feel like shortcuts rather than improvements. You may overcomplicate tasks or push yourself past what is required just to feel deserving. The discomfort becomes the goal, not the outcome. What makes this lie powerful is how virtuous it sounds. Hard work is celebrated, resilience is admired, and struggle is framed as character building. Your brain uses these values to justify exhaustion and dismiss sustainable progress. But effort is not defined by how much it hurts. Many forms of effective work feel calm, focused, and even enjoyable. By assuming effort must feel hard to count, your brain ignores growth that comes through alignment and skill. It confuses suffering with substance, quietly teaching you to distrust ease even when ease is earned. Your brain confuses prediction with explanation. Your brain feels satisfied once something makes sense. When an outcome is explained in a way that sounds coherent, it relaxes, as if understanding has been achieved. That sense of relief is deceptive. An explanation that feels plausible is not the same as an explanation that could have predicted the outcome beforehand, but your brain treats them as equal. This confusion comes from hindsight. After something happens, your brain connects causes and effects into a smooth narrative. The story feels obvious in retrospect, so your brain assumes the outcome was predictable all along. It forgets how uncertain the situation actually was before the result was known. Emotionally, explanations create comfort. They reduce anxiety by giving chaos a shape. Your brain prefers a neat story over acknowledging randomness or complexity. If something can be explained after the fact, it feels like the world is understandable and controllable, but explanation is cheap. Many different stories can be built to justify the same outcome once it's already known. Your brain doesn't test whether the explanation would have held up in advance. It rewards coherence, not accuracy. This distortion breeds overconfidence. Because past events feel explainable, your brain believes future events should be predictable too. When predictions fail, it blames missing information rather than the limits of foresight. Your brain isn't lying out of malice, it's managing uncertainty. By confusing explanation with prediction, it gives you the illusion of insight while quietly inflating confidence. The story feels satisfying, but satisfaction is not foresight, and understanding after the fact does not mean you truly knew what would happen before it did. Your brain underestimates adaptability. Your brain consistently misjudges your ability to adjust. When faced with change, loss, discomfort, or uncertainty, it predicts collapse rather than adaptation. It imagines future pain as overwhelming and permanent, assuming that whatever disrupts your current balance will break you rather than reshape you. This isn't realism, it's a failure of imagination. This happens because your brain simulates the future using the present emotional state. If something feels threatening now, your brain projects that feeling forward, assuming it will remain just as intense. It forgets that humans are not static systems. We recalibrate, normalize, and rebuild far more quickly than we expect. Emotionally, this lie makes change feel unbearable. You delay difficult decisions because your brain exaggerates how hard it will be to live with the consequences. Staying in familiar discomfort feels safer than risking unknown discomfort, even when growth lies on the other side. Your brain confuses unfamiliarity with incapacity. What your brain overlooks is evidence. You have adapted before to heartbreak, stress, failure, and loss. Each time, the adjustment happened gradually, quietly, without announcement. Because adaptation lacks drama, your brain doesn't store it as proof. It remembers the fear before the change, not the resilience after. This distortion also fuels anxiety. By assuming you won't cope, your brain amplifies threat and urgency. It treats challenges as emergencies instead of processes. Fear becomes a warning signal rather than a passing response. Your brain believes it is protecting you by lowering expectations, but it is actually limiting you. Underestimating adaptability shrinks your sense of possibility and makes temporary discomfort feel catastrophic. In reality, humans are defined less by how they feel at the moment of change and more by how quickly they adjust after it. Your brain just rarely sticks around long enough to notice. Your brain believes fear equals danger. Your brain treats fear as a warning signal, and once fear appears, it assumes a real threat must be present. The feeling itself becomes the evidence. If your heart races or your stomach tightens, your brain concludes that something is wrong, even when the danger exists only in imagination. This belief comes from survival wiring. Fear once reliably signaled predators, threats, and harm. Your brain learned to trust it without question. But in modern life, fear is triggered by thoughts, memories, and social situations just as easily as by physical danger. Your brain doesn't distinguish well between imagined and real threats. Emotion intensifies this illusion. Fear demands attention and action. It narrows focus and shuts down reflection, making the feeling feel urgent and authoritative. Your brain mistakes intensity for accuracy, assuming that a strong fear must correspond to a serious risk. Over time, this habit trains avoidance. Your brain learns that feeling afraid means you should retreat, delay, or stay silent. It interprets discomfort as danger rather than as a signal of growth, uncertainty, or learning. What makes this lie persistent is relief. Avoiding what scares you reduces fear in the short term, and your brain treats that relief as proof that avoidance was correct. The cycle reinforces itself. Your brain believes it is keeping you safe, but by equating fear with danger, it limits experience, opportunity, and growth. It convinces you that safety lies in comfort, when often fear is simply the body reacting to the unfamiliar, not warning you of harm, but of change. Your brain mistakes repetition for mastery. Your brain is impressed by familiarity. When you repeat something often enough, it begins to feel automatic, smooth, and effortless. That ease creates the illusion of mastery. Your brain interprets reduced friction as evidence that you fully learned the skill, even when your performance hasn't actually improved. This happens because repetition lowers cognitive load. Each time you do the same thing the same way, your brain expends less energy. That drop in effort feels like progress. Your brain rewards it with confidence, quietly signaling that the work is done. But ease is not the same as depth, and comfort is not the same as competence. Emotionally, repetition feels reassuring. It creates predictability, and predictability feels safe. Challenging yourself introduces uncertainty and the possibility of failure, which your brain wants to avoid. So it keeps you looping through what you already know, reinforcing habits rather than expanding skill. Over time, this creates stagnation disguised as expertise. You get better at doing the familiar version of the task, not at adapting, refining, or correcting mistakes. Your brain stops noticing errors because it no longer looks closely. Familiar actions become invisible. What makes this lie dangerous is how convincing it feels. Confidence grows simply because the action no longer feels hard. Your brain assumes that if you can do something without thinking, you must be good at it. Feedback is ignored, nuance is lost, and growth quietly plateaus. Mastery requires deliberate difficulty, not just repetition. It demands attention, adjustment, and discomfort. But your brain prefers the comfort of routine. By mistaking repetition for mastery, it protects your ego while limiting your potential, keeping you busy without truly letting you improve. Your brain believes opinions are facts. Your brain experiences opinions as conclusions, not preferences. Once you form a viewpoint, it stops feeling subjective and starts feeling like a description of reality. The opinion doesn't register as what I think, it registers as how things are. That shift happens quietly, without your awareness. This belief forms because opinions are usually built on emotion, experience, and identity. Those elements feel personal and deeply real, so your brain treats the resulting judgment as grounded truth. The stronger the emotion behind an opinion, the more factual it feels. Disagreement then feels less like a difference in perspective and more like an attack on reality itself. Emotionally, this lie is stabilizing. Facts feel solid. Treating opinions as facts gives your brain certainty and reduces doubt. Questioning them would require emotional effort and vulnerability, so your brain resists. It prefers the safety of conviction over the discomfort of ambiguity. Your brain also confuses repetition and agreement with verification. Hearing your opinion echoed by others strengthens the illusion that it's factual. Familiar arguments feel correct because they're easy to process, not because they've been tested. Once an opinion hardens into a fact, curiosity shuts down. Evidence is filtered through the belief instead of used to evaluate it. Contradictions are dismissed and nuance disappears. Your brain stops asking whether it might be wrong and starts defending its position as if truth itself were under threat. By believing opinions are facts, your brain simplifies the world, but that simplicity comes at a cost. It turns dialogue into debate, difference into conflict, and learning into defense, all while convincing you that certainty is the same thing as being right. Your brain assumes rare events won't happen to you. Your brain uses probability as emotional reassurance rather than as a neutral calculation. When something is described as rare, your brain quietly translates that into not relevant to me. Low likelihood becomes emotional distance. The event feels abstract, distant, and safely assigned to other people's lives, not yours. This happens because your brain struggles to hold statistics and identity at the same time. Numbers describe populations, but your brain experiences life personally. If something hasn't happened to you or to people close to you, it doesn't feel real. Your brain mistakes lack of experience for lack of risk, confusing unfamiliarity with impossibility. Emotionally, this assumption reduces anxiety. Constantly imagining unlikely dangers would be exhausting, so your brain filters them out to preserve peace of mind. It tells you that preparation is unnecessary and caution is overreacting. The calm that follows feels like evidence that the assumption is correct. This lie becomes dangerous when it shapes behavior. Warnings are ignored, precautions feel excessive, and early signs are dismissed because the event almost never happens. Your brain frames concern as paranoia and luck as protection. When nothing goes wrong for a while, the belief hardens. What your brain overlooks is how probability actually works. Rare events are rare across many people, not impossible for any one person. Every occurrence still happens to someone who assumed it wouldn't be them, but your brain doesn't imagine being the exception to safety, only the exception to misfortune. Your brain isn't being reckless, it's conserving emotional energy, but by assuming rare events won't happen to you, it trades realism for comfort. It replaces preparedness with optimism and awareness with denial, quietly betting your future on the hope that statistics will keep you personally untouched, even though they never promise to. Your brain overestimates emotional reactions. Your brain is a poor predictor of how intensely and how long you will feel things. When you imagine future events, it inflates the emotional impact, convincing you that joy will be overwhelming or pain will be unbearable. The anticipated feeling becomes larger than life, even though reality rarely matches the forecast. This happens because your brain focuses on the peak of emotion and ignores adaptation. It imagines the moment of impact, but forgets how quickly humans adjust. Your brain zooms in on the feeling and erases context, routine, and recovery, creating a distorted emotional prediction. Emotion reinforces the illusion. Strong feelings in the present make future emotions feel equally intense. If you are anxious now, your brain assumes future discomfort will be just as sharp. If you are excited, it assumes happiness will be permanent. It confuses the snapshot with the whole movie. Over time, this bias shapes decisions. Your brain avoids choices that seem emotionally devastating and over-pursues ones that promise extreme happiness. It underestimates resilience and overestimates fragility, making change feel riskier than it is. What makes this lie convincing is imagination. Your brain can simulate emotions vividly, and those simulations feel real enough to guide behavior. The body reacts as if the imagined feeling has already arrived. Your brain believes it is preparing you. But by overestimating emotional reactions, it traps you in forecasts that exaggerate pain and idealize pleasure. It forgets your capacity to adapt, recover, and normalize, leaving you governed by emotions you haven't even experienced yet. Your brain misjudges the source of happiness. Your brain is constantly trying to predict what will make you happy, but it relies on shortcuts that distort reality. It focuses on visible rewards, milestones, and external changes, assuming that once a certain condition is met, happiness will follow automatically. This prediction feels logical, yet it is driven more by imagination than by lived experience. This misjudgment happens because your brain is better at anticipating emotion than sustaining it. It imagines happiness as a peak, a moment of arrival, and assigns that feeling to outcomes like success, recognition, or possession. The anticipation itself feels energizing, so your brain treats the target as the source of happiness. Emotionally, this creates a cycle of chasing. Once the goal is reached, the emotional high fades faster than expected. Your brain adapts quickly to new conditions and resets its baseline. Instead of questioning the prediction, it assumes the happiness must lie in the next achievement, not in the process or internal state. What makes this lie powerful is comparison. Your brain scans others for cues about what should make you happy and internalizes those signals. It confuses socially rewarded outcomes with personal fulfillment. The mismatch creates quiet dissatisfaction, even when things appear to be going well. Your brain also overlooks invisible sources of happiness because they lack drama, meaning, connection, and alignment grow slowly and don't announce themselves with intensity. They don't trigger anticipation in the same way, so they are undervalued. By misjudging the source of happiness, your brain keeps you oriented toward future relief instead of present experience. It treats happiness as something to acquire rather than something to cultivate, convincing you that fulfillment is always just one condition away, even as it quietly passes through moments you're too busy chasing to notice. Your brain believes attention equals importance. Your brain assumes that whatever captures your attention must matter. The more something pulls at your focus, the more significance your brain assigns to it. Attention feels like a spotlight, and anything illuminated by it begins to feel urgent, meaningful, and worthy of concern, regardless of its actual impact. This belief exists because attention evolved as a survival filter. What demanded focus was often what could help or harm you. Your brain learned to equate salience with value. But in the modern world, attention is constantly hijacked by novelty, emotion, and noise, not by what is most important. Emotionally, this lie is exhausting. A single notification, comment, or headline can outweigh slow, meaningful priorities simply because it intrudes. Your brain reacts to interruption as if it were significance. The suddenness of attention makes the event feel larger than it is. Your brain also struggles to distinguish voluntary focus from captured focus. If something grabs you, it assumes you chose it. That assumption reinforces the idea that it deserves your energy. Over time, your sense of importance becomes shaped by what interrupts you, not by what aligns with your values. This distortion pulls you toward the immediate and away from the essential. Long-term goals fade because they are quiet. Shallow stimuli dominate because they are loud. Your brain ends up serving whatever shouts the most. By equating attention with importance, your brain hands control to whatever is most stimulating. It convinces you that urgency equals value, even as truly important things require sustained focus, patience, and deliberate choice. The spotlight feels meaningful, but it doesn't discriminate, and your brain rarely questions why something has your attention, only that it does. Your brain confuses motivation with readiness. Your brain treats bursts of motivation as signals that you are prepared to act. When inspiration hits, it feels energizing and clear, as if momentum alone guarantees follow-through. That emotional surge is intoxicating, so your brain assumes that wanting to do something is the same as being able to do it right now. This confusion exists because motivation is loud and readiness is quiet. Motivation arrives with excitement and vision, while readiness depends on skills, structure, timing, and resources. Your brain favors what it can feel immediately, so it elevates emotion over preparation and urgency over stability. Emotionally, this leads to false starts. You commit, announce, or begin before the foundation is in place. When friction appears, motivation fades, and your brain interprets the struggle as a personal failure rather than a predictable gap between desire and capacity. Confidence collapses, not because the goal was wrong, but because the timing was. Your brain also uses motivation to escape discomfort. Acting quickly feels better than sitting with uncertainty or planning. Readiness requires patience, which offers no emotional reward, so your brain rushes forward, mistaking impulse for alignment. What makes this lie persistent is how convincing motivation feels. It creates the illusion that everything is aligned, that the moment is right. But motivation is temporary by nature. It fluctuates, while readiness sustains action when enthusiasm disappears. Your brain believes it is pushing you toward growth, but it is often setting you up for disappointment. By confusing motivation with readiness, it teaches you to start based on emotion and stop when emotion fades. Progress becomes inconsistent, not because you lack drive, but because your brain keeps mistaking excitement for preparation and intensity for stability. Your brain assumes confidence improves accuracy. Your brain feels safer when certainty is present. When you feel confident, your brain interprets that confidence as a signal that your judgment must be sharper and your thinking more precise. Doubt feels like weakness, so confidence is treated as a corrective force, something that sharpens perception and improves outcomes simply by being present. This assumption exists because confidence reduces internal conflict. When you are confident, competing thoughts quiet down, hesitation disappears, and decision-making feels smoother. Your brain mistakes this internal calm for improved accuracy. It confuses emotional stability with correctness, even though they are unrelated. Emotion strengthens the illusion. Confidence feels empowering. It creates a sense of control and competence, which your brain finds rewarding. That reward reinforces the belief that confidence itself is doing the work. Your brain rarely checks whether the underlying information improved or whether errors were simply ignored. Over time, this bias reshapes behavior. Your brain begins to favor feeling sure over being careful. It discourages second-guessing, reflection, and revision because those states feel uncomfortable and threatening to self-image. Accuracy, which often requires uncertainty and humility, gets deprioritized. What makes this lie dangerous is feedback delay. Confident errors don't always fail immediately. Sometimes they succeed by chance, reinforcing the illusion that confidence was responsible. Quiet mistakes go unnoticed, allowing the belief to grow stronger. Your brain believes it is upgrading performance, but by assuming confidence improves accuracy, it replaces learning with conviction. It rewards how sure you feel instead of how well you reason, leaving you increasingly confident while slowly drifting further from reality. Your brain believes current feelings define reality. Your brain gives enormous authority to what you feel in the present moment. When an emotion is strong, it feels truthful, as if it reveals how things really are rather than how they feel right now. Sadness becomes evidence that life is bleak. Anxiety becomes proof that danger is near. Your brain collapses the distinction between emotion and fact. This happens because emotions are immediate and immersive. They color perception, memory, and interpretation all at once. Your brain has difficulty holding distance from a feeling while it's active, so it treats the emotion as reliable information. What feels intense feels important, and what feels important feels real. Emotion also narrows perspective. When you're overwhelmed, your brain filters out contradictory memories and alternative explanations. Past moments of calm or confidence become inaccessible. The current feeling fills the entire frame, and your brain assumes the state is permanent rather than temporary. What makes this lie powerful is how convincing it feels from the inside. You don't experience emotions as signals, you experience them as truths. Questioning them feels invalidating or dishonest, so your brain discourages doubt and rewards emotional alignment. This belief fuels impulsive decisions and harsh self-judgments. A bad moment becomes a bad identity. A wave of fear becomes a verdict about the future. Your brain treats feelings as conclusions rather than data points. By allowing current emotions to define reality, your brain sacrifices perspective for immediacy. It forgets that feelings change faster than circumstances and that emotional states are weather, not climate. But while the feeling lasts, your brain insists that this is how things are, how they've always been, and how they will remain, even when history and evidence quietly disagree. Your brain ignores unseen alternatives. Your brain judges choices based on what it can see. Once a decision is made or a path is taken, everything not chosen fades into nothingness. The alternatives that never happened don't feel real, so your brain doesn't factor them into how it evaluates outcomes. What exists feels meaningful. What doesn't exist feels irrelevant. This happens because your brain works with concrete experience, not hypothetical space. It can emotionally process what occurred, but it struggles to represent outcomes that were never lived. As a result, The visible option feels like the only reasonable one, even when countless other possibilities were available. Emotionally, this lie protects you from overwhelm. Considering every alternative would be paralyzing, so your brain simplifies reality by collapsing it into a single story. That story feels complete because nothing competes with it. The absence of comparison creates false certainty. This distortion shows up strongly after outcomes are known. If something succeeds, your brain assumes it was the best choice. If it fails, your brain believes no better option existed. The unseen paths are erased, removing context that could soften self-blame or challenge overconfidence. Ignoring unseen alternatives also shapes how you judge others. You evaluate their decisions without accounting for options they never had access to or outcomes you never witnessed. Your brain assumes the visible result tells the whole story. By focusing only on what happened, your brain creates a clean narrative. But that cleanliness is deceptive. Reality is shaped by countless invisible branches that were never explored. When your brain ignores them, it mistakes partial information for the full picture, leaving you confident in conclusions built on what you saw, not on everything that was possible. Your brain believes choice validates outcome. Your brain gives special moral weight to decisions you willingly make. Once you choose something, it feels earned, justified, and therefore right. The act of choosing creates an emotional commitment, and that commitment quietly shifts how your brain evaluates the result. If you decided it, the outcome must have value, otherwise the choice itself would feel threatening. This belief exists to protect coherence. Your brain wants your actions and beliefs to align. Admitting that a chosen path led to a bad or meaningless outcome creates internal conflict, so your brain resolves that tension by upgrading the result. What you chose becomes what was meant to happen. Regret is softened, not by changing reality, but by reframing it. Emotionally, this lie reduces pain. Accepting that a freely made decision turned out poorly feels heavier than accepting that circumstances forced your hand. Choice becomes a shield against disappointment. Your brain prefers to believe the outcome was valid rather than confront the discomfort of misjudgment. This distortion also affects persistence. Once you've chosen something, your brain defends it longer than it should. Evidence that the outcome isn't working is dismissed as temporary or irrelevant. Walking away feels like invalidating your own agency, so staying feels safer even when it costs more. What keeps this lie powerful is how empowering choice feels. Autonomy is deeply satisfying, and your brain borrows that satisfaction to justify results. But choice only explains why something happened, not whether it was good. Your brain isn't evaluating outcomes objectively, it's protecting identity. By believing choice validates outcome, it confuses ownership with wisdom and commitment with correctness. In doing so, it traps you in decisions long after they've stopped serving you, quietly turning freedom into obligation and choice into something that must be defended rather than questioned.